The magical dragon attempted to summon a goddess possessing extraordinary beauty and miraculous healing powers. However, instead of a goddess, Ojin appeared, in a state of sheer confusion and disorientation. Thinking he was dead, he began recalling his past life. The grueling years at veterinary school, constantly being scolded, finally earning his vet degree only to grit his teeth through 3 years of meager pay caring for abandoned pets. After all his hard work, our protagonist managed to open a small clinic, but it was barely surviving, with no customers in sight and even the sign's lights burned out. One night, as Ojin lay in bed pondering his miserable situation and mounting debt, he suddenly heard a strange noise before he could even react. Our boy unexpectedly found himself inside a treasure-filled cave with a glowing summoning circle. Convinced that he had descended into hell, he loudly demanded to know why he was brought here, to which the dragon explained it summoned him to treat its pet. Expecting a terrifying monster, our hero was left dumbfounded when the dragon opened its claws, revealing a tiny, frail, fast-sleep fruit bat named Catlas. Looking at the skinny, dehydrated bat, Ojin instantly switched to professional mode, asking about its name, symptoms, and how long the dragon had been caring for it. The dragon proudly stated it had kept Catlas for a week, ever since pet keeping became a trend among dragons. Recalling his disdain for those who adopted pets just to follow a trend, our protagonist immediately asked if Catlas was being fed properly. The dragon confidently replied that it fed the bat fresh animal blood, assuming this bat had refined culinary tastes. Speechless Ojin could only bow his head in sheer helplessness. Realizing this was the exact type of owner he hated the most, the kind who knew absolutely nothing about their pets. Annoyed, he explained to the dragon that fruit bats do not drink blood, only vampire bats do, adding that Catlas had been starving for an entire week. Embarrassed, the dragon admitted this was its first time raising a bat. Ojin scolded it for not doing research beforehand, then pointed out that the freezing temperature of the cave could be fatal if the bat woke up from hibernation. The dragon protested that it was an ice dragon, but our boy sternly affirmed that this environment was still entirely unsuitable for bats. Feeling remorseful, the dragon bowed its head to apologize to Catlas, prompt to find some fruit immediately and return the bat to its original home. Grateful for Ojin's help, the dragon offered to grant him a wish as a token of appreciation. He joked that he wanted to be reincarnated as a wealthy Arab prince or the heir of a villainous family. The dragon was baffled by this bizarre request. It took off its necklace and handed it to Ojin. It explained that this was a magical pendant capable of granting any wish, as long as it did not stem from malicious intent. As the pendant began to glow, our protagonist was certain he had crossed over to the afterlife. Right before vanishing, he hastily wished to go back to the early days of Bitcoin. The dragon watched Ojin disappear, then rushed off to prepare fruit for Catlas, still wondering about the strange goddess it had just summoned. A few moments later, our hero found himself standing on a bustling street packed with pedestrians, loud noises, and the aroma of food. Still bewildered, he wondered if this was reincarnation or possession. A fruit vendor noticed his odd outfit and asked if he was a traveler from afar, then explained that he was in the Belmore region, famous for its inns and markets. But before he could even reply, chaos erupted as a giant rabbit charged straight down the street, devouring the scattered carrots. People screamed and fled in all directions. But Ojin remained rooted to the spot, astonished by the sight of a monster freely roaming among the crowd. The fruit vendor warned that it was Lord Belmore's pet and urged him to run. Right at that moment, Ojin spotted a crying little girl directly in front of the rabbit. Without hesitation, our boy dashed forward, grabbed the girl, and pulled her away right before the monster could reach her. As the rabbit continued its rampage, his pendant suddenly glowed, and a blue chain materialized around the rabbit. The astonished crowd murmured in awe, whispering that he must surely be a mage. The fruit vendor tightly hugged her little sister, remarking that the protagonist did not look like an ordinary traveler. Lord Belmore arrived at the scene, absolutely furious to see his pet bound. Ojin explained that the rabbit almost attacked a child, but Belmore refused to believe it. Losing his patience, our hero snapped that the worst pet owners were the ones who ignored their pet's mistakes, and warned that this rabbit's bite could easily crush a skull. The fruit vendor and her sister exchanged agreeable glances at his bluntness. Upon examining the rabbit more closely, Ojin noticed its ears, and realized this was an overfed, highly stressed domestic rabbit. When he pressed about its behavior, Belmore admitted that the rabbit Elizabeth often plucked her own fur. Ojin explained that such stress could lead to death and advised against bringing her to crowded places. When Belmore asked about its exercise, our boy advised letting it run freely at home without spoiling it too much. Shocked and ashamed, Belmore shed tears, confessing that people often mocked him for keeping a rabbit. But Ojin clearly understood animals better than anyone else. Belmore immediately summoned his butler, handed Ojin a pouch of coins, and asked him to check on Elizabeth's condition from time to time. After apologizing to his pet, he left with it, while our protagonist muttered that he would never return to this place again. Suddenly, everyone around gathered, cheering and praising Ojin's bravery. The fruit vendor thanked him for saving her stall and offered him a discount, but when our hero explained he had no money, she simply pointed at the coin pouch. Opening the pouch, he discovered gold coins, and bit one to confirm if it was real or not. Realizing it was pure gold, our boy cracked a slight smile. He thought that perhaps he could finally open another clinic here and wipe out all his debts in the human world. Ojin thanked all the candidates for coming to the recruitment session and amusingly added, hoping that one of them would be selected. He then announced that it was time to begin the interviews. He likened it to a survival death game. For a moment, the protagonist's thoughts drifted back to Lord Belmore, who had generously offered to support him with land and money when Ojin decided to settle in this new territory. Thanks to that assistance, the second branch of his veterinary clinic opened incredibly smoothly, and Lord Belmore even prepared a storefront for him, although it was bizarrely filled to the brim with rabbit-related items. Even so, our boy didn't mind at all. It was free anyway, and his relationship with Belmore seems extremely valuable. Business quickly consumed Ojin's days, but he realized he knew too little about this world, especially the dragon that brought him here, since the creature had promised to take him home but ended up ditching him in this foreign land. Determined to find answers, our hero decided to post a notice in front of his new shop, Pet Hospital Hiring Staff, thinking he might find someone capable of handling both assistant and technician duties. As the interviews began, Ojin sat up straight, observing the long line of candidates. The first candidate, Thomas, proudly boasted about his noble background, his strict father, and his gentle mother, so our protagonist listened for a while, but quickly grew tired of his sheer arrogance. The next candidate, Philip, claimed his family had been in the animal-related business for generations, which sounded quite promising at first, until he revealed that his family actually ran a butcher shop. That was enough for Ojin to silently cross his name off the list. Clearly, finding normal people in this world was much harder than he had anticipated. The third candidate stepped up, a man with a pale, tense face and eyes that looked like they were looking for trouble. Our boy told himself not to judge a book by its cover, but his patience ran completely dry when the man suddenly dropped to his knees on the floor, begging to be hired, and that was it. Ojin decided that from now on he would absolutely judge others by their appearances, but before he could even react, a young woman stepped out of the applicant line. Without a single word, she punched the man right in the face, sending him flying straight into the corner of the room. She introduced herself as Selena, a freelance animal expert with experience in basic treatments. Her confidence and composure left a strong impression, so Ojin hired her on the spot. The following afternoon, our main character sat in his cozy new clinic, enjoying the warm sunlight streaming through the window. It was already noon, and Selena still hadn't shown up. Perhaps he had been too hasty in his hiring after all. He was debating whether to put up another hiring notice or not, when he suddenly heard a knock on the door. Thinking it was his new assistant, he opened it, only to find an unfamiliar man standing before him. A few minutes later, the man was sitting comfortably, sipping a cup of tea while Ojin smiled politely. Deep down, however, our hero was celebrating wildly. He had finally welcomed his first customer, marking the first step on his journey to pay off his debts. He recalled his previous clinic, which had failed due to his short temper. He vividly remembered the time he snapped at a customer who refused to brush their pet dog's teeth, yelling so loudly that rumors of a rude and crazy veterinarian spread like wildfire. This time, however, Ojin was determined to smile, stay calm, and skillfully empty his customer's pockets. Returning to the present, he spoke up to ask about the man's pet. The stranger gave a bright smile and pointed to his pocket, revealing a tiny lizard named Pojak. Our boy almost breathed a sigh of relief. At least this time it looked like a normal creature, not one of those typical monstrosities found in this world. That relief quickly vanished when the man casually admitted that he had grabbed its tail until it snapped right off. Ojin had to suppress the urge to scold the guy, then shifted his attention to the lizard. He carefully examined Pojak and noticed its skin was dry, rough, and red, a clear sign of improper shedding. When he brought up this issue, the man immediately warned that Pojak could be very aggressive. The tiny creature promptly proved its owner right by breathing a stream of fire straight at the protagonist before Ojin could even react. Selena suddenly burst through the door, shoving him aside to save him from the attack. The flames scorched the wall right behind them. Still shaken and with a little blood at the corner of his mouth, Ojin muttered that taking the hit directly might have been less painful. Regaining his composure, he realized his first patient at the new branch was a salamander, a fire-breathing lizard that couldn't be touched with bare hands. He wondered if the clinic had any fireproof equipment. Meanwhile, the man stared passionately at Selena, praising her beauty, while she interrogated him about where he had picked up this creature. The guy proudly explained that he had found it on the mountain behind the village, insisting it was love at first sight. Selena told him that keeping a salamander was illegal as they were an endangered species due to overhunting. Even so, she reassured him that if they declared it as a temporary hold for medical treatment, the authorities might overlook it, provided he released the animal afterward. But the man hugged Pojak tightly, his eyes brimming with tears, and adamantly refused to let go. Suddenly, he dashed toward the door, screaming that no one could separate him from his beloved salamander. Ojin stood dumbfounded, staring blankly at the wide-open door. Selena hesitated for a brief moment before our hero snapped at her to chase after the guy. Just like that, the clinic's very first checkup turned into a ridiculous chase across town, a perfect start to the chaotic next chapter of Ojin's new life. Ojin told Selena to go after the man first, and the market was instantly thrown into chaos. The fruit-selling lady, who had just been humming about how peaceful everything was without the constant interference of the Reverend Father, quickly realized that peace never lasted for long. She immediately ducked behind her stall, as the chaos swept through, telling herself it was best not to get involved. The man sprinted through the crowd, clutching something tightly against his chest with desperate determination, while our boy chased closely behind, out of breath but refusing to give up. The stall's owner watched the commotion and whispered that whatever was happening, it had nothing to do with her. The frantically fleeing man muttered about someone trying to snatch Pojak away from her. The male lead and Selena continued their pursuit until sheer exhaustion forced both of them to slow down. Panting heavily, she remarked that Ojin needed to exercise a lot more, then quickly refocused on the salamander's emergency. He acknowledged that the creature's unshed skin had dangerously stacked up and needed immediate treatment. Selena's expression hardened as she remembered the danger. A salamander that failed to shed its skin would eventually explode, and its inner fire would incinerate everything around it. With no time left to rest, they had to find this creature before disaster struck. Meanwhile, thinking he was safe, the man returned home. Heaving a sigh of relief, he placed Pojak on the table and called it destiny for them to be together. His overwhelming happiness swiftly turned into artistic inspiration as he began to sing, letting a bizarre melody echo through the room. Suddenly, panic replaced his artsy mood, as Pojak's body trembled and erupted into fierce flame. In just a split second, his house was entirely engulfed in a sea of fire. He coughed violently amidst the thick smoke. The man tried to talk some sense into the salamander, reaching his hands out as if affection could quell the flames. Pojak responded with another blast of fire, making the blaze roar even wilder. Selena arrived just in time to drag the man to safety, while our male lead braced himself against the intense heat, determined to subdue the frenzied creature. He gloomily thought about how nice it would be to have a fire extinguisher right now. Immediately after, his pendant began to glow. As the light faded, Ojin found exactly that resting right in his hands. There was no time to question this miracle. He charged forward, extinguishing the roaring flames, until the salamander's resistance gradually weakened, and the room fell silent, leaving only the faint sizzling of steam as the fire died out. Selena checked the surroundings. The man was sitting in a daze amidst the rubble, muttering that this madness was definitely caused by the failed skin-shedding process. He firmly declared that he would take better care of Pojak next time, his tone filled with stubbornness and blind affection. The male lead looked at him quietly, wondering if this guy even understood what true care meant. Love without understanding, Ojin thought to himself, was merely selfishness disguised as devotion. Later on in the forest, Pojak finally finished shedding its skin. Selena commented that it looked much more energetic and full of life, while our boy stared at its size in sheer disbelief. The man gazed at the salamander with a mix of pride and bittersweet sorrow, mumbling that it was time to let it return to the wild. He watched as Pojak disappeared behind the trees, whispering promises to care and miss it that surely no creature could ever understand. Ojin rolled his eyes at the cheesiness, secretly thinking this would only bring more trouble, but the man hardly noticed. In his mind, this farewell was truly noble. The moment suddenly turned unexpectedly tender as Pojak stopped on a distant rock and launched a giant fireball high into the sky. The flames bloomed into brilliant fireworks, painting the sunset with shimmering colors. The man looked up, his heart overflowing with emotion, while our protagonist silently acknowledged that the treatment process was finally completed. A few days later, that same man reappeared at the town square. Now, calling himself Royce, he was playing the guitar next to the fountain. The children danced around him as he sang an eccentric melody about Ojin's adventures, a song that quickly went viral, lifting the spirits of everyone who heard it. Selena observed from afar, half amused, while our protagonist stood beside her, unimpressed but slightly curious, as he noticed people talking about bringing their pets to his place. Ojin even found himself complimenting Royce's singing. Not long after, the consequences arrived. Outside Ojin's pet clinic, a massive crowd gathered, blocking the entire street. Dozens of people chanted his name, demanding treatments and craving his attention. Our guy sat motionless, realizing his peaceful days were over. Selena looked at the endless line and muttered that perhaps she should just quit her job altogether. Amidst the noise and chaos, Ojin realized their small clinic had inadvertently become the busiest place in town. It was a typical morning, with birds chirping outside Ojin's clinic as a long queue of people gathered at the door. He finished examining a patient and announced the session was over, simultaneously advising them to schedule a follow-up to check on the recovery progress. Selena stood next to him, remarking that at this rate he would turn into a soulless corpse before next week, so he should make money while he still could. He then called the next patient in. Looking back, it had been 2 months since the grand opening. The second clinic was thriving, partly thanks to those morning chirping birds. The first few days were indeed exhausting due to the overwhelming number of customers. But after seeing the revenue earned, everything gradually settled into a stable routine. A customer peeked in to ask if they were still open. Selena immediately replied they were closed, but Ojin still let the person in. While treating the patient, our protagonist pondered on what he had learned about this world. Outside, people were chatting about their pets. One person mentioned that Coco had lost her appetite lately, while another pointed out a cat's bloodshot eyes. Dogs and cats here were still very close to humans, although their illnesses could be quite different. Later, Ojin stretched his arms, remarking that today was an exhausting day. Selena informed him that the next case would be the last one. Curious, he asked what kind of animal it was. Selena explained that it was a shaman hound, once used for hunting and now a popular pet, but they were extremely aggressive towards anyone except their owners, resulting in the highest abandonment rate. Our protagonist muttered that those who kept pets just to follow trends should just disappear. He recalled hearing that shaman hounds could grow as large as a human body, with claws and teeth sharp enough to pierce a wild boar's skin. Selena warned him to be careful. The next guest brought in a shaman hound puppy. It looked clearly exhausted and was only 2 months old. The owners explained that it had been limping since yesterday. Ojin examined its leg, noting that a puppy at this age should have healthy joints. Upon checking its paw pads, he discovered a thorn embedded inside. He used tweezers to pull it out, then proceeded to disinfect the wound, and assured them that the wound would heal soon. The small shaman hound staggered around, and our protagonist quietly observed, while Selena glanced over, slightly curious, as the owner left. Ojin breathed a sigh of relief, stating that the workday was finally over. Selena remarked that he looked happy. He appeared bewildered. When she asked if it was because of the cute puppy or because his shift had ended, Selena teased that it was rare to see him rejoice for any reason other than money. Ojin replied that there were no severely injured patients today, and explained that the hardest part of being a veterinarian was having to sit near sick animals. The more he cared, the more it would break his heart, so he always tried to maintain an indifferent attitude. His mind drifted to a customer in his old world, someone who had abandoned their pet for an extra month just to go on vacation. Our guy remembered greeting them with a sarcastic tone and realized that ever since then, he had started scolding guardians more often. As closing time approached, Selena noted that it was getting dark. Ojin mentioned the overwhelming number of customers and urged her to quickly clean up before the sun fully set. Suddenly, the exact same man from the previous encounter appeared outside, loudly crying for help. Ojin turned to ask Selena if she knew how to perform an exorcism. She replied that she probably could if physical attacks actually worked on spirits. The man barged in, grabbing our protagonist, then dragged him straight out through the window, leaving a stunned Selena utterly speechless. A moment later in the forest, Ojin lay flat on the ground while the man continuously apologized, insisting he never expected the protagonist to be so weak that he couldn't even climb a hill. Ojin interrogated him to find out who he was, realizing this person wasn't a ghost. The man introduced himself as Schwein, a territorial administrative official, and explained that he had brought the protagonist here after hearing about his talent for soothing the Lord's rabbit. Schwein requested him to catch a wild dog, but Ojin refused, reasoning that he was a veterinarian, not an animal rescue worker. Selena, appearing nearby, further emphasized that they were not a rescue squad. Schwein insisted that they were his only remaining hope. He explained that 2 months ago that wild dog had occupied a spot halfway up the mountain, right where the new trail construction project was about to begin. They had tried to catch it, but the dog was too fast, whereas the construction was set to start the day after tomorrow. If they couldn't capture it, the military would be dispatched and the animal would be eliminated on the spot. Our protagonist thoughtfully remained silent, before finally speaking up to ask where the dog was currently located, clarifying that he had never captured animals before and only wanted to observe the situation first. Schwein agreed, stating that it was located a bit further up the mountain. Ojin reminded him that he hadn't agreed yet. He was only here to take a look. Selena, with a meaningful smile, remarked that he would end up doing it anyway. At the scene, Schwein pointed out the place where the wild dog frequently roamed. Suddenly, a noise caught their attention, and a shaman hound stepped out from the shadows. Ojin recognized it immediately, while Selena noted that many people kept shaman hounds, but just as many ended up abandoning them. Nowadays, many people kept shaman hounds because it had become a trend, yet most of them ended up being neglected and forgotten. As Ojin observed the condition of the shaman hound before him, he could tell that it had been surviving on its own for nearly 2 months, and perhaps it hadn't eaten properly all that time. Unexpectedly, a strange sound echoed from the forest, startling everyone as they assumed it was some kind of monster. The protagonist turned toward the source of the sound. At that very moment, the shaman hound let out a piercing howl and charged straight at him. Selena quickly intervened, pulling our guy out of the danger zone and warning that standing so close would be highly dangerous. Ojin remarked that turning one's back to run away from an enraged dog was the worst possible reaction, while Selena retorted that doing nothing would only let the animal tear them apart. Then the protagonist explained that running away would only agitate the creature even more. They needed to find a way to distract its attention. Before he could even finish his sentence, the shaman hound suddenly stopped dead in its tracks. Everyone was stunned, astonished by sudden mixes. The protagonist wondered aloud why it had stopped. He recalled Schwein's description of this animal as a hound and pointed out that such a creature, if truly enraged, wouldn't retreat so easily. Yet right before their eyes, the shaman hound quietly walked back into the forest. Selena muttered that no one could truly understand what was going on inside a dog's head. Meanwhile, Schwein explained how this creature constantly chased people away. Its behavior had become such a major nuisance that residents from the nearby village continuously filed complaints. As Ojin listened, he sank deep into thought before his curiosity arose. Ojin asked what kind of complaints they had received, and Schwein described how the locals called this animal a ferocious beast roaming the mountain, a creature they considered dangerous and demanded to be captured. The protagonist pondered this, then wondered if anyone had actually been injured by it. Schwein instinctively intended to agree, but after pausing for a moment, admitted that not a single person had been hurt. Turning to Selena, Ojin recalled her mentioning the shaman hound's loyalty to their owners and asked if she still believed in that. Selena confirmed she did, and Ojin's expression slightly changed, as if something had just become clear in his mind. The next morning, Ojin and Selena set off toward the nearest village at the foot of the mountain. Their focus shifted from confronting the wild dog to uncovering the story behind it. Now, our guy was searching for the dog's former owner, believing that understanding its past was the key to approaching it. Although time was extremely short and other methods seemed easier, he knew that merely using food to trap the animal wouldn't be effective. The dog's emaciated, starving body was speaking of something stronger than mere instinct, an unbreakable bond that even hunger couldn't overpower. As they were walking, Memories and thoughts intertwined in Ojin's mind. He recalled how some owners would gently command their pets to stay put, promising they would return soon, only to vanish and never come back. That kind of loyalty and betrayal must be the root cause of this dog's suffering. Our protagonist had seen many people willing to abandon those who trusted them most, a sight that left him secretly infuriated. Resolute, our hero promised himself that upon finding its owner, the culprit would have to face his sins and witness how much the loyal dog had suffered. As they began asking around the village, a situation quickly unfolded. A villager told Ojin that Gabriel's husband couldn't continue his work because of the dog roaming the mountain. Parents also forbade their children from going near the forest out of fear of the creature lurking within. And even the children passing by recounted similar terrifying stories. An old man muttered vaguely about losing money years ago, and though his words seemed unrelated, one fact was obvious. The whole village deeply hated the stray dog. After hours of inquiring, he and Selena stopped at a quiet street corner, exhausted from hearing the same fearful accounts. Ojin began to suspect that perhaps the dog's owner wasn't from this village. Selena agreed, noting that at the very least, everyone they met shared a common animosity toward the animal. Just then, a long-haired woman approached them. She had overheard their questions, and with a solemn expression, she stated that they were looking for Jake, the man who once owned the dog. She urged them to follow her, and led them toward Jake's house. Ojin noticed how isolated the house was, almost hidden among the trees. The woman explained that Jake lived alone, separated from the villagers, which was why very few people knew about him. As they arrived in front of the small wooden cabin, she stopped near a simple grave right by the entrance and quietly revealed that Jake had passed away 2 months ago in a landslide. She explained that he had no relatives and that she was the one who arranged his funeral. Furthermore, she insisted that Jake never abandoned his dog. He simply couldn't return. The woman also confessed that she had tried to bring the dog home but failed. Now, with a sorrowful voice, she pleaded with him to help the animal she called Max. The weight of her words etched deeply into Ojin's mind. He felt immense regret upon realizing how wrongly he had misjudged the situation. Our hero silently prayed for Jake to rest in peace, expressing his remorse, and firmly promised that they would save Max, no matter what it took. Later, back in the forest, Schwein told the newly arrived police officers that he thought they were supposed to come tomorrow. Realizing they must have finished their previous assignment ahead of schedule, he suggested postponing Max's extermination until the next day. But the officers immediately dismissed the idea. One of them asserted that there was no reason to wait, and this matter needed to be handled right away. Since the villagers already despised the dog so much, he argued, no one would object if they finished the job a day earlier than planned. Back at Jake's house, Ojin stepped inside and immediately caught the faint scent of herbs in the air, a clear sign that Jake was a herbalist. Selena suggested grabbing anything with the owner's scent for now and pointed to some clothes hanging nearby. Our hero's gaze drifted toward a picture frame on the shelf, showing Jake and Max together. He wondered what could have happened to a man who loved his dog so dearly. Then Selena noticed a picture on the wall and pointed it out to him. It was an image of a mandrake. She remarked that Jake must have gone searching for this plant. He recalled seeing a mandrake in a movie, and Selena explained that it was a screaming plant, an extremely rare and hard to collect specimen. The two of them remembered the strange sound coming from the forest the day before. Despite the danger, a mandrake was incredibly valuable, something any herbalist would dream of finding. Meanwhile, Max sat at the entrance of his cave, gazing up at the sky. The dog was lost in memories of his former owner. It was raining that day when he and Jake took shelter in a cave. Jake laughed at the sudden downpour, wondering if they should wait for the rain to stop before moving on. Lighting a campfire, he draped a woolen blanket over Max, telling him to stay still lest he catch a cold. Max snuggled closer. Jake, despite being utterly exhausted, still smiled and said they were truly lucky to find a place to shelter from the rain. Looking around, Jake spotted a plant growing close to the cave wall. Recognizing the shape of its leaves, he realized it was a mandrake. Utterly astonished, he confessed he never thought he would see one in real life rather than in books. Thrilled, he decided to run home to get his specialized tools, telling Max to stay and wait, promising to return right away. Max gave a soft bark, but Jake reassured him that home wasn't that far away. With a smile, he stepped out into the rain. And then, a horrific rock slide suddenly crashed down, claiming his life in an instant. Time passed. The fire in the cave had died out. But Max still patiently waited in absolute loyalty. The following week, some tourists passed by. One of them noticed the dog had been there for quite a while. They assumed he was abandoned and showed pity, intending to feed him, but as they approached, Max let out a terrified howl and backed away. Chasing them off, he startled the tourist, who left muttering that this dog was dangerous. No wonder its owner abandoned it. Max returned to the cave and sat there waiting for Jake once again, completely unaware that he would never return. In the present, as Max was reminiscing about Jake, the police officers approached. One suggested there was no rush since it was late and they should head back to the lodge soon. Standing before Max, they readied their tranquilizer darts, potent enough to take down a shaman hound. Schwein begged them to wait one more hour, explaining that he had hired someone to help rescue the dog. From what Schwein had seen, Max had never harmed anyone and was just a pitiful dog with his own story. The officer remained unmoved, coldly stating they weren't here to listen to a dog's backstory. Their mission was to protect the citizens, and that was the only thing that mattered. As he spoke, he raised his gun to take aim. Max panted heavily. Just as the officer was about to pull the trigger, Selena and Ojin rushed in to stop him. Selena declared that they must rescue the stray dog, not harm it. In that moment, Max saw an illusion of his owner standing before him. Smiling gently, the figure said he had come to pick him up and that Max had waited far too long. Overwhelmed with joy, Max stepped forward and happily wagged his tail, believing his master had finally returned. Our protagonist stepped closer. His voice dropped to a gentle tone as he admitted he wasn't the one Max was waiting for, but it was time to go home. The lonely dark night enveloped the forest where a deer was running for its life, pursued by a wild creature, one with glowing yellow eyes piercing through the darkness. Its ear-piercing scream echoed across the treetops, shattering the silence of the woods. By morning, the peace in Ojin's clinic was shattered when a client barged in, frantically begging for help with their pet. Our hero looked down and discovered Panda's round as a ping-pong ball so obese it could barely roll around. He muttered in disbelief while the owner insisted the panda had grown weak and barely ate anything, now surviving on just 7 meals a day. Ojin sighed, warning that if it didn't undergo healthy weight loss, it could fall seriously ill. The owner looked utterly shocked, refusing to believe it, while he simply called for the next patient without another word. Schwein walked in with his familiar polite smile, courteously greeting our protagonist. His appearance reminded Ojin of Max, the dog who once came down from the mountain after losing his owner. Max had lingered for days by his master's grave, unable to accept the reality of Jake's passing. Pitted by the whole village, the dog eventually opened up to the person who had come to visit and care for him, who was none other than Schwein. When Ojin asked why Schwein had come and if something had happened to Max, he remained silent before suddenly pulling out of his bag an intact mandrake with its roots and leaves. Selena noticed something unusual about it. Its roots were completely exposed above the soil, unlike most mandrakes that preferred to burrow deep underground. Schwein explained that Jake, before passing away, had discovered this mandrake and decided to keep it as a memento. However, when they tried to replant it in the ground, the mandrake kept continuously popping out of the dirt, screaming incessantly day and night, until everyone in the village was forced to wear earplugs, with some even suffering ruptured eardrums. Selena noted that this could happen as mandrakes were notorious for being extremely sensitive to their surroundings. Schwein stated that the plant had become unmanageable, noting that it was only quiet now because it was sleeping, but once it woke up, chaos would ensue. He begged Ojin to take it. Ojin refused, insisting he only treated animals, not plants, and besides, anything that screamed couldn't be considered a plant. Schwein argued it was neither plant nor animal, but something much worse, a demon, to which Ojin retorted that bringing it to a church would make more sense then. Before they could exchange another word, the mandrake began to squirm. Panicking, Schwein yelled that it was waking up and hastily abandoned the plant, fleeing the clinic with his companions before Ojin could stop them. Furious, Ojin cursed and chased after them, muttering that he had seen people abandon many things but never a plant, while Selena quickly covered the mandrake with a glass dome. She reminded him that mandrakes were incredibly valuable herbs, and every part of them, from leaves to roots, could bring the dead back to life. He grumbled about their value if they couldn't be controlled, when suddenly the mandrake opened its eyes wide. Selena warned him to cover his ears before it screamed, fearing for their eardrums. Ojin, panicking, complained about his lost noise-canceling headphones and braced himself. But instead of screaming, the mandrake gave a blank, innocent smile. He watched as Selena studied its behavior, realizing that it seemed to really like him, and she told him to take out his necklace. As soon as he did, the mandrake's eyes widened. It began to dance joyfully, leaving our protagonist hardly able to believe his eyes. While Selena burst into laughter, remarking that his cheerful demeanor looked exactly like a sunflower toy she had seen before. He muttered that such a comparison sounded incredibly bizarre, but Selena simply told him to keep it in his room for now, and despite his protests, he eventually did just that. Later that night, a loud knock on the door woke our hero. Still groggy, he grumbled that nighttime checkup cost an extra fee, until a woman rushed in, carrying an injured dog that was bleeding profusely. Seeing the deep gashes, our protagonist muttered that the wounds were too severe to stop the bleeding. Selena reminded him that mandrake leaves possessed extremely potent blood-clotting properties, and following his instructions, she approached the plant. The mandrake glared at her warily, so she hesitated and suggested Ojin ask for it himself. He grumbled at the absurdity of having to ask a plant for permission but complied anyway, and the moment he asked for a leaf, the mandrake smiled, danced, and hummed softly. Although utterly baffled, he accepted the leaf and successfully stopped the bleeding, saving the dog's life. The woman sobbed with overwhelming gratitude, while our protagonist let out a long yawn, telling her to come back for follow-up before heading back to bed. Just half an hour later, another frantic knock disturbed his sleep. This time, a man stood at the door, holding a badly mangled deer and pleading for help. The animal's body was covered in brutal wounds, and Ojin grimly determined they were not caused by hunting, but rather by someone who seemed to take pleasure in this cruel abuse. He muttered that whoever did this was definitely a psychopath, leaving the villagers confused as they asked each other if it was some new kind of monster. A little girl quietly explained that it was actually Baron Doyle's pet wolf, a beast that did such things purely for entertainment. Ojin's disbelief quickly turned into outrage as he cursed the noble, demanding to know why this behavior was allowed while screaming about the lack of animal protection laws. The villagers reminded him that the Baron was untouchable, a true aristocrat. Our protagonist loudly condemned the injustice, yelling about freedom, laws, and democracy, concepts the others had never even heard of, till Selena reminded him to focus on treating the deer. A week later, chaos erupted outside the clinic as a massive crowd gathered, all crying and demanding the doctor save their pet. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Ojin joined the uproar, shouting that he couldn't live like this anymore and calling for a class revolution. He led them up toward Doyle's mansion soon, chanting accusations against the Baron and demanding justice for the abused animals. That was until the Baron's guards arrived. When they asked for our protagonist, he muttered that their intel was terrifyingly fast and stepped forward to state his name. To his surprise, the soldiers bowed in respect and respectfully escorted him to the castle. Inside, he saw a massive blood-fanged wolf lying on the floor with extremely severe injuries. Baron Doyle stood beside it in despair, begging Ojin to save his beloved pet and promising to reward him with anything. Our protagonist and Selena stood frozen, stunned by the sight of the very creature that had caused so much suffering. Following a week of beastly attacks, the townspeople gathered, whispering about a magical creature spotted in the western forest. Rumors spread that the exiled wolf had been killed, and a giant man-eating monster was now prowling the woods, attacking humans after hunting down the animals. Fear gripped the crowd. Some believed the village was doomed and discussed fleeing to the lower settlement. Others insisted there was no need to worry as Baron Doyle had launched a monster subjugation campaign. They mentioned a massive trap set in the forest, along with soldiers patrolling day and night. The villagers praised the Baron as a reliable figure, convinced they were living safely under his protection. Our protagonists listened, fully aware that the truth was completely different. He recalled seeing the Baron sobbing and screaming at his subordinates to catch the monster that attacked his child at all costs, while the servants desperately tried to calm him down and quietly handled the situation. To Ojin, this scene was no different from media manipulation in his world. Selena stood beside him, noticing the guarded look on his face. Our protagonist pondered the fact that most of the injured animals brought to the clinic had been attacked near the eastern forest, right next to the village, while the incident with the Baron's wolf occurred deep in the west. Despite this, the Baron's men continued to focus their search in the western forest, completely ignoring the east. Selena also found this suspicious, as the villagers rarely set foot in the western forest, which was widely rumored to be haunted. As they were discussing this, a man from the glass workshop called them inside, announcing that Ojin's orders were finished. The syringes were ready. They were mouth-blown tempered glass mixed with albarium powder, boasting excellent heat resistance and durability. Our protagonist inspected them, highly impressed by the craftsman's skill. He praised the extraordinary technology and marveled at them being handmade, while the artisan confided that the process was grueling and firmly stated he couldn't make any more. Ojin paid him very generously, establishing a long-term partnership despite the man's reluctance. Gradually, the clinic was equipped with more new tools and the renovation process began. And Selena inspected the layout, amazed by the modern and organized structure, while he thought to himself that the place finally looked like a real hospital. One day, a man walked in carrying bundles of herbs. He introduced a variety of herbs with miraculous effects, some inducing sleep when eaten or inhaled. Others relieved stomach aches or suppressed coughs, and there was even a herb with antiseptic properties. Ojin examined them in disbelief, finding their effects extraordinary. Some were even rumored to cure incurable diseases, prompting him to mutter that not even his world had anything like this. While Selena teased him for his skepticism, suddenly a girl barged in, urging Ojin to hurry because the monster had been caught. In the forest, soldiers, hounds, and Baron Doyle were gathering around the destroyed trap. The trap was shattered to pieces. A thunderous roar echoed through the trees as the soldiers pressed forward, declaring that the monster had been cornered. As our protagonist approached, the creature's dark silhouette emerged, but it only revealed a small cat meowing angrily. Everyone fell silent while the soldiers hesitated, and remarked that it looked no different from an ordinary stray cat. But the Baron insisted it was the very creature that terrified his wolf, pointing at its claws and fangs as proof of its demonic nature. Ojin realized the soldiers were being completely serious, as they threw a net over the cat. The animal struggled and cried out while the Baron laughed loudly, ordering it to be burned alive. Our protagonist immediately objected, but the Baron demanded the cat be dragged to a public execution while still alive. Looking at the terrified animal, our protagonist recalled his own world, where a man once brought an injured cat to his clinic, explaining that he had fed it at the shopping district before someone harmed it. Ojin had called those people demons, and he despised animal abusers more than anything else. Back to the present, the cat tore through the net, causing the soldiers to panic and scream to trap it again. Suddenly, the young man had an idea, shouting at everyone to quickly cover their mouths and noses. Then he pointed at the cat's forehead. An M-shaped scar glowed faintly on its forehead, and he declared it the mark of a great demon, the bringer of a global plague, the mark of Corona, a terrifying pandemic. Ojin proclaimed it was a demon, the embodiment of a massive plague. He asserted the source of the disease initially spread through rats, then transmitted to the cat that ate those infected rodents and absorbed their dark magic. It had become an even more powerful host for the disease. According to our protagonist, this cat was the root of an impending disaster, warning that once the disease began to spread, half the population would be wiped out. Those who were ready to kill the cat listened in disbelief. The soldiers scoffed at his claim. Even Baron Doyle questioned the truth, expressing doubt about our protagonist's story. Despite their skepticism, Ojin remained firm, remembering a world much like this one that once had to fight against a similar pandemic, a world filled with masks, fear, and chaos. He insisted that this creature might indeed carry demonic energy, but it was still small enough to be suppressed. He added that a cure was found in his world and the same could be done here. Turning to Selena, Ojin silently hoped she would back up his lie. She immediately did so, calmly explaining that with the cat's blood and the right herbs, they could create a cure. Outwardly calm, our protagonist worried that his scheme might fail. The soldiers mocked the story as absurd, but before the tension could escalate further, the Baron gave Ojin a one-week deadline, during which he had to cure the creature and bring it to the castle, after which the cat would still face a public execution. The scene shifted back to the clinic. Our protagonist sighed in relief, thanking Selena for her quick wit, impressed by how well she played along. She replied that she wasn't lying. Technically, a cure could be concocted using this creature and mandrake roots, although that would require hundreds of mandrake roots. She asked why he wanted to save that animal. She warned that once it awakened, its power might become uncontrollable. Ojin explained that this cat wasn't responsible for the attacks in the village. He brought out the animal injury records, pointing out that the wounds differed in both size and shape from what the cat could inflict. This pattern suggested an entirely different predator. Selena quickly realized the truth. Magma Baron Doyle's wolf must be the real culprit, and the cat was merely acting in self-defense. Our protagonist agreed, but found this highly suspicious. He found it questionable that the Baron, who had previously covered up Magma's attacks, suddenly blamed another beast and launched a public hunt. He suspected the hunt was merely a smokescreen to cover up the real target, which was the cat. Selena remarked that this would explain why the Baron wanted to capture the creature alive instead of killing it, and why he accepted Ojin's forced explanation so easily. The comment about his clumsy lie annoyed our protagonist. But his attention soon turned to the cat's wounds. The scar on its forehead wasn't a normal injury, and the old marks along its legs showed it had suffered for a long time. He was determined to find out the truth about what this creature had gone through. Selena observed him closely, realizing he wasn't the greedy, apathetic veterinarian she had thought. There was a gentleness in how he cared for the animal. Eventually, the young man suddenly hugged the cat, burying his face in its fur, and he praised it for being so soft and warm. This sight instantly wiped away Selena's previous impression, making her firmly believe that Ojin was simply crazy, while the nearby mandrake fumed with jealousy. The next morning, bizarre cries echoed from outside the clinic. The townspeople gathered, whispering in awe and fear about those strange sounds. Rumors spread quickly, claiming that our protagonist was fighting a demon and purifying the source of the plague. In just a few hours, public opinion had turned him into a legend, a mage from another world. The crowd chanted his name, hailing Jin as a great mage. Inside, completely unaware of the growing commotion outside, our protagonist was trying to feed the cat. But only once got scratched in the face again. The creature's temper frustrated him. Yet he noticed it looked somewhat smaller than before. Selena pointed out that both its size and weight had decreased over the past 3 days, speculating it might be losing its demonic energy. Ojin concluded that it was simply starving and hunger was fueling its rage. It was burning energy and worsening its hunger in a vicious cycle. While our protagonist wished for that magical churu cat treat, a sudden pain squeezed his chest. The dragon necklace around his neck glowed. It emitted a light that condensed into a familiar treat looking like a chocolate bar. The treat flew straight into the cat's mouth, and it started munching happily. Ojin, sighing in relief, continued feeding it with growing affection, while Selena stood watching silently in disbelief. As the cat ate, the scar on its forehead began to glow faintly. Stunned, Selena suddenly realized everything made perfect sense. The creature before them had never been just a simple cat. The Monoceros, a one-horned lion, once reigned as a legendary divine beast. During the era when dragons vanished and mana flooded the world, revered as sacred, their horns blessed barren lands with fresh water and turned darkness into light. Their hearts held the miraculous power to generate mana themselves, and the horn on their forehead acted as a divine conduit channeling that energy. However, those who dared touch them would face inevitable death. After the terrible mana famine, their kind dwindled, forcing them to disguise themselves as smaller creatures to survive. Despite being weakened, they never lost the pride of their divine bloodline and were never subdued by mortals, except for a single entity, the healing spirit. At the clinic, the little cat finally managed to relieve itself, which and Ojin, sighing in relief, immediately praised it, while feeding it the churu treat. Selena stood watching, wondering if it was wise to continue coaxing this creature with that magical treat. That same night at Baron Doyle's mansion, a spy reported to him that the cat had obediently eaten, and our young man was holding it in his arms like a child. The Baron listened suspiciously as the soldiers knelt beside him, their voices full of unease. They spoke of the demonic lion and the rumored plague, warning that this creature might not be ordinary at all. They recalled that no human had ever tamed a Monoceros, weakened one. In the worst-case scenario, the mana within their bodies could corrupt into poison, turning them into living bombs. Their power, they said, could bring down an entire nation. Baron Doyle, filled with unease, recalled Ojin's words about a plague that once devastated his world, a war that humanity had to fight for years. He also remembered the legend that a Monoceros rejected all food offered by humans. Now he began to wonder if our protagonist knew something that no one else did. The next morning, the clinic was bustling with activity. The new assistant PO acted as the receptionist, calling the next patient into the clinic. The space felt lively and organized, just as a real clinic should be. Meanwhile, Selena scolded a noisy patient whose animal refused to sit still, her anger steadily growing. And in a fit of anger, she used magic to quell the chaos, startling everyone as Ojin watched in horror when she repeated the spell on another customer, causing pandemonium inside the clinic. Then, without warning, Selena abruptly took a half-day off and disappeared again. Later, our male lead discovered a handwritten note from her announcing her unauthorized absence. That sloppy handwriting only fueled his frustration as he complained that even real veterinarians would never act so unprofessionally. Desperate for help, he asked Pio, a nearby acquaintance, to fill in temporarily. To his surprise, Pio proved to be incredibly proficient at the job, handling customers, carrying heavy equipment, maintaining order with cheerful diligence. Her work ethic impressed our hero so much that he started considering hiring her as a full-time employee. In the midst of a busy day, Ojin noticed something strange. The clinic, usually filled with the cries of various animals, suddenly fell dead silent. The next morning, the mystery was finally revealed. When a familiar patient returned, the hamster Ping Ping, Ojin stared in disbelief as the creature that once weighed less than half a kilo now looked 10 times larger, roughly the size of a small dog, making him wonder aloud if it was turning into a panda. The owner quickly corrected him, calling it a flopper dog, and only then did our guy realize that in this world, hamsters were known by a completely different name. The owner, confused by his reaction, asked if he even knew what a flopper was, prompting Ojin to try and cover it up. But Pio smoothly intervened, explaining that he came from another world. That was why he used different terms, and why his medical knowledge far surpassed the locals' understanding, leaving our flattered male lead to just listen as the owner concluded he must have studied abroad. Both proud and amused, he immediately hired Pio as a permanent staff member. Turning his attention back to Ping Ping, Ojin examined its oversized body, noting that the creature still appeared perfectly healthy. Although its unusual color and size raised many questions, he guessed it might have absorbed some sort of growth magic, and as he was observing it, the cat beside him clearly displayed its jealous and pounced straight toward the hamster. The very moment they made contact, Ping Ping instantly leaped into three identical clones. Everyone in the clinic froze in shock. Ojin struggled to process what he was seeing, silently protesting that this violated every law of physics he had ever known. The overjoyed owner embraced the three creatures, declaring that after years of loneliness, Ping Ping finally had a family. One of the smaller clones darted across the room. This sparked a chaotic chase throughout the clinic, as the creatures' tiny bodies made them impossibly fast, only adding to the total pandemonium. Selena suddenly returned, appearing out of nowhere, and with effortless precision, she caught all three of them, two in her hands and one in her mouth. And she declared them to be bloops. But when questioned about their origin, the owner admitted that he had received the creature as a gift from his father, completely unaware of its true nature. Selena decided to keep them for further observation, reassuring the owner that they wouldn't be in any danger. Ojin added that the clinic never conducted unethical experiments and nothing would happen without the guardian's consent, though deep down he wondered why he was the one preaching morality. That evening, Selena explained that bloops were not natural creatures at all, but rather artificial entities created by a mad mage long ago. Our hero was utterly astounded, realizing that even this world had its own share of mad scientists. Selena emphasized that the mage wasn't purely evil, just misguided, and his creations, while unstable, were never meant to cause harm. Ojin remarked that bloops should have gone extinct a century ago and was surprised to encounter one after such a long time. Fueled by curiosity, he casually asked Selena just how old she really was, but before she could answer, a bizarre gurgling sound echoed from the nearby Skoongi, prompting our male lead to turn and look in concern. But a knock on the door interrupted him. From behind the door, a soldier's voice announced that Baron Doyle had arrived. As the stormed into Ojin's clinic, he declared that he would drag the monster out. Our male lead was gripped by silent panic, torn between hiding the cat or helping it escape within a week. He still hadn't had any time to prepare, as every waking moment was consumed by caring for the creature. Forcing a nervous smile, our hero politely greeted the nobleman, his mind drifting to Selena, who had already slipped away and left him to fix the mess alone, while the Baron flopped down, ignoring all pleasantries, jacked on tiffer of tea, and demanding to see the monster immediately, causing Ojin to hesitate and mutter that the treatment was not yet complete. But the Baron coldly pointed out that if the clinic was still open, the treatment must have certainly been finished. Our guy quickly fabricated a wild story on the spot, claiming that an accident during the exorcism had caused a mysterious crest to appear between him and the cat, binding them so tightly together that they could no longer be separated. The Baron's men exchanged skeptical glances, muttering that he must be out of his mind to expect anyone to believe such nonsense, making him realize his story was already falling apart. Our male lead shifted his tactics, questioning why the Baron was keeping another black cat locked up in his mansion's dungeon. This accusation caught the nobleman off guard, and for a brief moment his composure wavered. Ojin pressed on, accusing him of plotting to swap the real cat with an innocent one, prompting the defensive and enraged Baron to immediately deny it. He deflected the blame by insisting that the animal attacks plaguing the village weren't caused by Sanjay, but rather by Ojin's own recklessness, while our hero countered that the true culprit was the Baron's wolf. Presenting medical records as evidence, he pointed out that the victim's wounds perfectly matched the claw marks of a wolf. One of the subordinates snatched the documents and tore them to shreds. And as the man mocked him, our male lead could only grit his teeth, silently cursing the fact that this world lacked digital records. Suddenly, one of the Baron's men shoved Ojin aside and advanced towards Sanjay's cage. The cat hissed and lunged out, scratching the intruder, sending our guy's mind into a tailspin. Summoning a steel transport cage would reveal too much, and any sign of a weapon could easily make the situation worse. He gripped the necklace around his neck, torn over whether to risk using its power, knowing that such an action could change everything. Before he could make a decision, the door was violently thrown open. Several elves stepped inside, led by Selena and a tall man with long white hair, whose voice echoed with absolute authority as he ordered everyone to step back. The Baron immediately recognized him. The emblem of the World Tree, the symbol of the divine beast Monoceros engraved on his forehead. All of these were the marks of Callion, the head of the Western Continent Supreme Supervisory Agency and the guardian of the Ethereum Society. The Baron stammered a greeting, masking his unease with a sarcastic remark about the irony of such a sacred organization appearing in a shabby clinic, while Ojin's blood boiled at the insult, but he remained silent. Callion declared that they had come following a report of a divine beast in danger. Our hero stared blankly, momentarily distracted by the elf's surreal beauty, looking just like a movie character brought to life, as he suddenly realized this was definitely the reason Selena had been missing for days. As she handed the cage over to Callion, it instantly dawned on him. Her slightly pointed ears had always been a clue, as she was also an elf, and Selena warned her superior to be careful, insisting that the cat was extremely ferocious. Callion began to chant a spell, enveloping Sanjay in a sphere of blue light, as the creature slowly levitated weightlessly. He examined the wound on the top of its head. He noted that it resembled the cross-section of a world tree branch, the unmistakable mark left by a mana extractor, a device used to drain the essence of divine creatures. His composure vanished, replaced by seething anger, as he turned to ask the Baron if he was the one who had cut off the horn of the divine beast Monoceros named Sanjay. The nobleman trembled, desperately insisting on his innocence. The Baron then fled in absolute panic when pressed with further questions. Our male lead stood, watching in awe, realizing that the power and influence of the elves here far exceeded even that of the nobility, and he couldn't help but feel thrilled by this display. Meanwhile, Callion remarked that only a handful of weapons could inflict such injuries on a divine beast, and promised that the truth would soon come to light. He thanked Ojin for protecting the creature and announced once that they would take over the care of the divine beast Monoceros. But before they could make move, Sanjay's energy suddenly flared up. The cat shattered the magical barrier and dashed straight forward, and it snuggled deep into our hero's arms, clinging tightly to him as if terrified of being separated. The elves stood frozen in disbelief, as a divine creature was actually seeking comfort from a mere human. Sanjay clung to Ojin's necklace, its body trembling. Callion's eyes narrowed as he observed the necklace, a clear glint of recognition appearing in his gaze. He muttered to his companions that the rumors were true, and its implications were far greater than expected. Our male lead felt uneasy under that scrutinizing stare, as it was the exact same look his college professor had given him before trying to recruit him into grad school. Even Selena was now looking at him with a deeply unfathomable gaze. After a moment's silence, Callion decided to entrust Santa Ojin. He explained that although standard protocol would require bringing both the human and the beast to the headquarters for investigation, but Selena's presence provided enough reassurance. She just shrugged with clear boredom, and our boy couldn't help but wonder about her lack of enthusiasm, wondering how she could maintain her composure through it all. Callion performed another spell. He summoned an intricate necklace and placed it around Sanji's neck. The amulet glowed faintly with protective magic, designed to help the creature recover its strength as a replacement for its lost horn. Sanjay squirmed around, clearly uncomfortable with the new accessory. One of the spirits explained that this charm also contained an emergency signal, allowing them to instantly sense if the creature was in danger. Ojin marveled at the sophistication of this magic, realizing it was essentially an automatic rescue system. Callion then pulled out a ring and offered it to our hero as a token of gratitude. He explained that it shared the power of the Celestian family, along with the same protective magic. Ojin hesitantly accepted it, feeling both honored and anxious about the burdens this gift might bring. Callion smiled gently and insisted on putting it on him personally. Despite feeling a bit awkward, our male lead agreed. The spirits murmured their approval, commenting that the ring suited him perfectly. He glanced at the sparkling ring on his finger, still unsure of what kind of destiny he had just stepped into. Kim Ojin had been single since birth, and now the first ring of his life was resting on his hand. It was a spirit's ring, glowing faintly with a highly suspicious magic. There was something about it that made him feel uneasy. He politely declined, apologizing and stating that he couldn't accept such a gift. A confused Callion asked why, but our hero explained that as someone who worked with his hands, accessories would only get in the way. Callion suggested he think of it as armor rather than jewelry, though he secretly noted that Ojin seemed completely out of touch with reality. However, our male lead remained firm, repeating that wearing anything on his hand would hinder his work as a doctor. Callion didn't argue further. Instead, he muttered a short incantation, and the ring dissolved into light, reshaping itself into a tattoo on Ojin's finger. It looked surprisingly cool. Callion instructed him to place the symbol over his chest and recite his family name. As Ojin complied, his finger lit up, and a hologram of Callion appeared before him. The spirit explained that this magic allowed for long-distance communication, a spell that transmitted both voice and image, before inviting him to try speaking to the light. Our boy repeated the word, and a small beam of light shot from his fingertip. The spirits watched with mild amusement as he excitedly waved his hand around, genuinely impressed by the magic. Callion assured him that there were other functions he would discover over time, but the most important one was the built-in protective charm. Ojin expressed his gratitude, still amazed at how the ring had transformed into such a modern-looking tattoo. Selena stood by, slightly amused, recalling how adamantly he had refused the ring, but now seemed quite pleased with the result. Callion's attention shifted to the necklace around our male lead's neck. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face. When Ojin explained that it came from a dragon, All the spirits were stunned, as dragons were believed to have vanished 1,000 years ago. He clarified that he had heard the same thing. He explained that he had once treated a dragon's sick pet as a healer. In return, the dragon gave him the necklace and promised to send him home, but instead, Ojin mistakenly ended up in this world. Realizing once again how deeply everyone here understood magic, our hero asked if anyone knew a way to send him back before he could even finish his sentence. The three spirits just stared at him with wide eyes. Then, falling to their knees, they began to reverently chant toward the divine healer, thanking fate for granting them the honor of meeting him. Ojin froze in confusion. They actually thought he was some kind of divine entity. Our boy protested, insisting they had it all wrong. He was just a normal human caught up in a dragon's mistake. The dragon's pet wasn't even seriously ill, it just lacked proper care. However, Kalyan pointed out that he had still received a necklace bearing the dragon's power. Ojin muttered that he only accepted it as travel fare after being thrown into another world against his will. Kalyan solemnly grasped his hands. He explained that their world was facing a severe crisis. Mana, the sacred energy that sustained all life, was drying up, though it had once flowed abundantly. But ever since the dragons went extinct, it had been declining, causing divine beasts to vanish and the world itself to wither away. If this depletion continued, the next generation wouldn't be able to survive. To combat this, the world's leaders had established the Ethereum Church, an organization dedicated to preserving mana and restoring balance. Our male lead listened, vaguely understanding that it was like some sort of magical environmental protection agency. Kalyan continued, mentioning that ancient legends spoke of the divine healer, an entity bearing the dragon's power who would one day save the world. Hearing this, all eyes turned to Ojin. He pointed at himself in disbelief, asking if they were really talking about him. Kalyan nodded solemnly, confirming they had been awaiting his arrival for centuries. Our hero tried to explain once more that they were completely mistaken, but the Spirit Clan members bowed deeply, vowing to dedicate their lives to serving the divine healer. The Celestian family and the Ethereum Church simultaneously pledged to protect him as well. The male lead felt the heavy burden of their devotion pressing down on his shoulders, his head spinning. He wanted to scream that it was all nonsense, and the dragon that brought him here must have been crazy. In his heart, he cursed the creature, wondering what kind of sick joke this was. The next morning, the chaos from the divine misunderstandings gave way to his familiar daily routine at the clinic. A customer brought in a flying fish and explained that it could no longer fly. Ojin examined it carefully and concluded that its diet was fine, it was simply getting old. The owner looked completely devastated. She asked if there was any way to slow down the process or help it fly again. The male lead gently explained that aging was a natural and unavoidable process, something everyone had to accept. The owner hesitated, then confided that her bedridden father had loved flying the fish his entire life. He used to raise several of them, but ever since he fell ill, they had steadily weakened one by one. And now only one named Lumi was left. It was originally a proposal gift from her mother decades before her father proposed. He had released Lumi into the night sky, its fins sparkling brightly like a star. Back then, flying fish could emit light as they soared, making them precious companions during festivals and celebrations. Hearing this, Ojin thought that proposing with a fish instead of a ring sounded super cheesy, while Selena explained it was considered romantic back in the day. The owner smiled faintly, admitting that it was no longer romantic now. She continued her story. She recounted that after her mother passed away, her father's health deteriorated, and he now lived a lonely life just caring for his last remaining fish. Recently, her father confessed that if Lumi could no longer fly, he would have no reason left to live. Our boy recognized the grief behind the story, much like the last leaf clinging to a branch before winter arrived. Selena indifferently suggested buying a new fish, which shocked him her lack of empathy and callousness. The owner teared up, begging our hero to treat Lumi and save her father from despair. But the male lead could only reiterate that Lumi was perfectly healthy. It was just aging, and not even magic could stop time. The owner still insisted that Lumi had to fly one more time to save her father from death. Despite Ojin's explanation that Lumi wasn't sick but merely aging, he could feel how dangerous emotional attachments could be. Even in this world, pet owners formed incredibly deep bonds with their companions, some refusing to eat or drink until their pets recovered, while others even wanted to die alongside them. Such emotions often caused more harm than good. Suddenly, Kalyan appeared, urging Ojin to make a promise before the male lead could even react. The scene faded and he woke up. It was all just a dream. In the morning, our hero greeted Pio, who immediately noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She confessed she had also stayed up all night. Pio assumed he was worried about Lumi the flying fish, although he adamantly denied it. She mused that the fish's condition might not be due to aging, but rather a mana deficiency. She recalled that when she was a child, the light emitted by flying fish had faded as the world's mana began to deplete, and as the mana in the air weakened, they gradually lost their ability to fly. Ojin realized this situation was very similar to environmental pollutions in his world. The ecosystem here was degrading in much the same way. He remembered the spirit's words saying he was destined to save this world. Selena joined the conversation, confirming that this issue wasn't limited to flying fish alone. Many animals were falling ill. What was often mistaken for aging or an unknown disease was actually caused by mana depletion. She stated that the clearest evidence was Monoceros, the creature that used to be a lion. Our boy recalled that Sanjay was also originally a lion. And though she looked incredibly adorable in the form of a cat now, he still wondered what her true form would look like. He imagined her grooming herself in the exact same way, even as a lion. An idea suddenly flashed through the male lead's mind. He asked Pio what disease usually affected the guardians of flying fish. She recalled it was an illness that weakened their bones, making them fragile and prone to breaking. Ojin asked Selena about the common medicine prescribed for it. She listed bloom root for bone recovery, blood root for pain relief, and other supplementary herbs. When he asked about the side effects, Selena mentioned that bloodroot caused fatigue and paralyzed the nerves over time. Our hero immediately recognized this as the problem and requested an antidote to counteract those side effects. Selena replied that such a medicine existed, but it would nullify the original healing effects of the cure. Even so, our boy insisted on knowing how to make it. Selena then pointed behind him, and the male lead realized she was referring to the mandrake plant. As he stepped closer, the mandrake frowned. Ojin explained that he only needed a few leaves, but the plant suddenly let out a screech so piercing that everyone, Selena, Pio, and our hero, all had to cover their ears. The mandrake burst into tears, leaving him completely helpless. Pio suggested that it might be feeling neglected since he had only focused on Sanjay lately. Our protagonist admitted that he always felt awkward around plants. Seeing him hesitate, Pio advised him to at least give it a name. The mandrake cried even louder. Helpless in the situation, he named it Kim Mandel. Instantly, the plant stopped crying and began dancing joyfully. Ojin picked 2 leaves, thinking to himself that the flora and fauna in this world were strangely affectionate. Selena quietly observed. Afterward, she asked to see his necklace. She examined it closely but found nothing unusual. When she put it on and tried to pet Sanjay and Mandel, both reacted extremely aggressively. Selena concluded that the necklace's bond only worked for Ojin. She asked him how to activate its power. He explained that focusing his thoughts would create a tightening sensation in his chest, then release the energy. Selena realized that this power might be closely tied to his heart. Ojin added that touching the necklace would attract creatures as if they were waiting for food, while feeding Sanjay his favorite churu treat. Selena noticed the glowing energy and deduced that our boy was unknowingly transferring his mana to the creatures. That thought made her cautious, as such a connection could be very dangerous. Meanwhile, Pio announced that the crushed leaves were ready and she had finished brewing a potion from them. She asked if she should bring another batch, and our hero agreed. Selena quietly observed him, lost in thought. Everything about Ojin, from the energy surrounding him to how the creatures reacted to his presence, seemed far beyond normal. For the first time, she began to wonder if he truly was the divine doctor mentioned in the ancient legends. At L'Oreal's mansion, she entered her father's room with his medicine and found him lying sprawled on the floor. She rushed over to help him up, quickly realizing that he had tried to stand just because Lumi wanted to be near the window. Despite his frailty, he insisted that he was fine. L'Oreal worried that his weak bones made such movements extremely dangerous, but he simply replied that his time was running out anyway. She objected, insisting that his condition could still improve. However, he believed that death didn't just come from illness, but also from the loss of hope. Tears streamed down her face as she begged him to stop talking like that, but he refused. Just then, Ojin, along with Selena, Pio, and the rest of the group appeared, interrupting the emotional atmosphere. He boldly declared that people died not from disease or fate, but from misinformation, incorrect prescriptions, bad habits, and lack of proper care. Both L'Oreal and her father were startled by this sudden intrusion. Our protagonist introduced himself and explained that Lumi's inability to fly wasn't due to old age. Instead, it was a side effect of the medications her father was taking. The father was confused, assuring him that he was the one taking the medicine, not Lumi. Our hero clarified that flying fish still retain their underwater grooming instincts. They would clean their food or the individuals they cared about. Lumi, by nibbling on her father's hair and beard, had absorbed the drug residues through contact. L'Oreal recalled the scenes where Lumi had spent long nights near her father, staying by his side. The old man realized the truth and muttered that this explained why his beard always looked so glossy. Ojin confirmed it and brought out syringes containing the cure he had concocted. He explained that the fish would regain its energy within a day or two. The father joked that he would shave all his hair and beard to avoid repeating this trouble. Our protagonist began the treatment. He held each fish while Pio restrained them for him to inject the medicine. Once finished, he remarked that this was a fast-acting drug. A few minutes later, Lumi began to wiggle and suddenly soared into the air. It emitted a faint glow as it flew toward the father. He stared at it, realizing this wasn't a dream. One by one, the other fish also started glowing and levitating. Their bodies radiated a soft blue light. The entire room was filled with shimmering illumination as the school of fish circled overhead, while L'Oreal and her father watched in awe. That sight reminded her father of the day he proposed to her mother, with glowing fish soaring into the sky exactly like this. Embracing Lumi, he was deeply moved. Pio quietly observed, understanding that this reaction came from contact with Ojin's blood and mana, while realizing he was no ordinary human. Selena also came to a similar conclusion, wondering if he truly was the one mentioned in the prophecy, the divine doctor. Later, Selena met with Kalyan to discuss the matter. Kalyan believed that everything perfectly aligned with the prophecy and asserted that Ojin's bond with Monoceros was undeniable, irrefutable proof. Selena questioned his decision to give our protagonist a ring that didn't belong to him, but Kalyan insisted that its original owner would definitely agree. He admitted that rumors of the divine doctor would soon spread across the world, and they planned to use this to expose the truth behind the hidden forces, rather than simply chasing enemies. Selena realized this was the reason Baron Doyle had been released, in order to lure those behind the scenes into the open. Kalyan reassured her that Ojin would not be in danger and pointed out that her meeting him in this village was absolutely no coincidence. Selena recalled the first time she saw our hero when he took down a giant rabbit in the village while wearing the mysterious necklace. Despite acknowledging that he was a unique individual, she remained skeptical about him being the divine doctor. Kalyan told her to keep observing, reminding her that the prophecy not only spoke of salvation, but also warned of the daunting trials to be faced beforehand. Another peaceful morning dawned at Ojin's clinic. Inside, a jelly-like creature known as a bloop was once again cowering on a leaf, even though its care fees had been settled last week. Our hero noticed it and felt annoyed, wondering why it was still here. Meanwhile, Sisina was taking care of the creature, explaining that she was looking after one of the 3 bloops. She handled it carelessly. This forced our protagonist to intervene, recalling that bloops were divided into the core type, which contained a core inside their heads, and the coreless type, which easily multiplied. Keeping the core type would prevent further division. But the one Selena was handling lacked a core and could clone itself when stressed. Selena confirmed it was a sensitive specimen that would multiply under pressure. Our boy felt uneasy. He knew all too well the dangers of keeping such creatures. Bloops could reproduce out of control, and they had previously wiped out entire villages when mishandled. Keeping one in the clinic alongside unstable creatures like the mandrake and Sanjay was truly reckless. He secretly questioned this decision, realizing Selena hadn't even asked the owner's permission but acted on her own under the guise of cooperation. Pio, witnessing the conversation, looked worried and delicately suggested that it might be best not to get involved. Our protagonist remembered hearing that elves who covered their ears often did so to hide the branded marks of criminals burned as punishment. That thought kept lingering in his mind. Selena's habit of acting before thinking, her evasion of personal questions, and her aggressive temper. All of these raised suspicions about her past, and Ojin briefly considered firing her. But before he could think deeper, he decided to drop the idea because the clinic's workload was too massive. Selena signaled that it was time to open, and the daily routine resumed. Elsewhere, at Baron Doyle's castle, the Baron conversed through a Lagrima crystal with a mysterious figure. The man demanded to know why the Ethereum Church had appeared at Ojin's clinic. The Baron explained that they barged in suddenly, mentioned the divine beast, interrupted his business, and then left. The man was furious, accusing the Baron of letting the Ethereum Church take Monoceros away. The Baron apologized and promised to retrieve it, but he added that he didn't need to steal the beast since it was already with Ojin. The man was stunned, knowing that an ordinary Monteceros could not live peacefully with humans. The Baron asserted that it willingly followed our male lead. He ordered him to silence everyone who knew about this, cursing him as a useless fool. The communication ended. This left the Baron extremely frustrated after a long scolding. He instructed the butler to summon Theodore and Alex, who were currently on vacation. The butler explained they had been granted leave after complaining about working overtime. Enraged, the Baron immediately canceled their vacation and demanded their return, realizing the trouble was only getting worse. Meanwhile, in the market, rumors of the Ethereum cult's appearance spread rapidly, with people buzzing about seeing the group firsthand. And they wondered why such a powerful cult would visit a clinic in a poor countryside. Rumor had it they came here for a rare divine creature. Some claimed our male lead was not just an ordinary doctor, but someone from another world. Others shared stories of him subduing a mana-accumulating demonic beast barehanded and taming a divine beast. These half-true, half-fabricated tales kept the whole town buzzing as night fell. The rumors began taking a new turn, with people calling Ojin the healing spirit, a figure originally thought to be female according to an ancient prophecy. Now they said the spirit was actually a man, and whoever gained his favor would rule the world. A woman with long pink hair discussed this rumor with her brown-haired friend, noting that the prophecy's meaning might change with this new interpretation. In the noble district of Manhwa, Adrian arrived at his clinic expecting the usual bustle, but found the place completely silent, muttering about the emptiness, and learned from the butler that not a single patient had shown up since morning. Suspecting interference from a rival faction, he swore to retaliate. His assistant gently suggested that the drop in clients might be related to a new veterinary clinic in Belmore Ojin's clinic. Adrian dismissed the thought, arguing that nobles would never step foot in a commoner's establishment. However, his composure completely crumbled upon hearing that Lady Marianne had canceled her appointment to visit Ojin's clinic. This revelation infuriated him immensely. Slamming his hand on the desk, Adrian immediately ordered his carriage prepared, determined to confront the one who humiliated him. Adrian, born into a noble lineage, possessed intelligence, talent, and striking looks. These qualities made his decision to become a veterinarian seem quite odd to many. However, he had one simple reason, which was his genuine love for people who cared for their pets. With his experienced charm, he often reassured anxious owners that their pets would recover, feeling satisfied when soothing their worries. Adrian always maintained a clear boundary between his personal life and professional work, except when dealing with one woman, Lady Marianne Astrid. From the moment she stepped into the clinic, his heart gravitated toward her, even believing he became a vet just to treat her unicorn. That belief turned into bitterness upon learning Lady Marianne chose someone else, a commoner, to treat Lulu, her unicorn. Enraged, he ordered the clinic closed for the day and immediately set off for the Astra estate. At the mansion, Marianne's mother received him politely but with obvious indifference, inquiring about the reason for this unannounced visit. Adrian expressed his concern for Lulu, describing the unicorn as highly sensitive and implied that leaving it with a strange commoner was irresponsible, but her mother corrected him. Ojin, that new veterinarian, was actually a woman. This revelation caught him completely off guard. She added that despite being a commoner, our male lead was rumored to be so skilled and beautiful that people called her a fairy or spirit. The thought flustered Adrian, who began imagining what kind of woman could be compared to a fairy. Perhaps a blonde angel or a mysterious dark-skinned beauty. His fantasies were cut short when Marianne's mother admitted she made up the story to test his reaction, then promptly ordered the servants to see him out. Humiliated but stubborn, Adrian insisted he wasn't obsessed with women, remaining solely loyal to Lady Marianne. His declaration only amused her mother, who still ruthlessly had him kicked out. Sitting in the carriage, Adrian was furious at these insults and decided to meet Ojin himself. He prided himself on understanding unicorns better than most. He knew they judged humans by their scent, absolutely detested the smell of blood and sweat, and could become aggressive toward men. Unicorns adored cleanliness and pleasant perfumes, and he believed his meticulous grooming made him the only suitable person to approach them. He recalled his own struggles to gain a unicorn's trust, and how his tactic of bathing twice a day and wearing the exact same perfume as their owner worked wonders. He was certain that a stinking commoner clueless about perfumes would definitely provoke Lulu's wrath, giving him the perfect opportunity to play the hero, saving the beauty right in front of Marianne. The thought made him blush and chuckle to himself, while the coachman silently pitied his delusion. As Adrian's carriage arrived in Belmore, he saw a crowd gathering outside the clinic, buzzing with excitement at the sight of a unicorn. Convinced our male lead was about to embarrass himself, Adrian prepared for a good show. But that confidence was completely shattered when he saw our male lead casually sitting on Lulu's back with the unicorn totally at ease. The crowd watched in awe, and even Marianne had to admit she had never seen Lulu let anyone else ride her. Adrian stood frozen, unable to believe his eyes, convincing himself there must be some trickery involved, perhaps magic from the elf woman standing next to Ojin. His suspicion vanished when Lulu suddenly bit the elf woman's hand, leaving her stunned and speechless. Ojin immediately administered first aid to the wound and dispersed the crowd. As whispers rippled through the crowd, Adrian, refusing to retreat in disgrace, decided to sneakily stalk them. He spotted an open window and began climbing a nearby tree, recalling his academy days when he used to be a tree-climbing champion. Through the window, he saw our male lead treating the elf's bite, casually applying herbs and bandaging with a highly unfamiliar technique. Adrian narrowed his eyes at the strange symbol faintly glowing on Ojin's hand. He was utterly shocked upon recognizing it. The crest of the Celestian family, the noblest of all elf families. He stared in astonishment, realizing the so-called commoner vet bore the mark of the highest elven bloodline. Ojin noticed a faint mark on Selena's hand while bandaging, quickly realizing the wound he thought was minor was actually infected by the creature's venomous saliva. He remarked they were lucky it wasn't worse. Selena, reflecting on the creature's earlier reaction, noted it displayed unusual hostility, a rare trait for its kind. Marianne apologized for the incident and insisted on covering all medical expenses. But our male lead declined, admitting it was due to their own carelessness. When Marianne pointed at Selena and asked if she worked at the clinic, Ojin explained she was a medical assistant handling herb dispensing and manual chores around the clinic. Marianne noted that, then remarked that despite Ojin's reputation, the clinic seemed a bit small for someone of his talent. This comment reminded our male lead of his old workplace, a cramped, noisy building, with frequently clogged toilets, broken heating, and constant animal complaints. Before he could finish his train of thought, Marianne interrupted, expressing sympathy for his past hardships and admiration for his achievements. Her voice softened into flustered compliments as she praised him and hinted her family could sponsor a larger clinic, leaving our male lead unsure if she was proposing a business partnership or something else entirely. Before the atmosphere settled, Lulu suddenly lunged to attack Sanjay, throwing the room into chaos. Both Marianne and Ojin rushed in to stop them, while Selena observed the unicorn intently. Despite their resemblance to the Monoceros, they usually coexisted so peacefully with smaller creatures. Marianne was furious at the implication that Lulu's temperament was to blame, and a heated argument quickly broke out between her and Selena. Accusations of bad manners, bribing for an advance appointment, and noble privilege echoed throughout the room. Pio muttered that the nobility truly had a different way of thinking. He received a sharp glare from Marianne as the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Lulu struggled violently, crashing into a bookshelf and sending it toppling over. Suddenly, a loud crash rang out as the window shattered and Adrian tumbled through, landing face first on the floor. Everyone over froze as Selena caught the falling bookshelf midair, saving it from collapsing. The group stared in bewilderment, unsure if the intruder was even alive. Adrian lifted his head, his face covered in blood but still smiling, and called out to Marianne with exaggerated relief. While Marianne stuttered in shock, Pio loudly demanded to know who he was. Adrian grandiosely introduced himself as Adrian Heaven Crown, kissing Pio's hand and declaring his devotion to protecting all beautiful lives. Ojin stared at him, utterly appalled by the dramatic entrance and arrogant tone, secretly likening Adrian to an overly theatrical influencer. When asked why he had entered through the window, Adrian retorted indignantly, firmly asserting that he was Lulu's primary attending physician, and accused Ojin of abusing it. The accusation quickly escalated into an argument, with Ojin insisting that Lulu was perfectly fine. Meanwhile, Adrian called him an unqualified fraud, even scolding him as an online catfish. Confused, Ojin turned to Selena for an explanation, and she's clarified that it was an insult meant for a deceitful philanderer who lured people in like a carnivorous plant. Our male lead realized the meaning a beat too late, growing even more bewildered and disbelieving. Marianne intervened, berating Adrian for his vulgarity. But Adrian pressed on, interrogating Ojin about his romantic history. Amidst the confrontation, Adrian noticed a mark on Ojin's hand and accused him of having ties to a noble bloodline or something even more scandalous. Pio blurted out that it was definitely an engagement ring. This caused everyone to look at him in astonishment. Flustered, he explained that the token was a gift from someone named Kalyan, but his explanation only deepened the confusion. Before anyone could ask further, Lulu began to tremble violently, breaking out in a cold sweat. Shortly after, it collapsed, and everyone immediately rushed to its side. Ojin quickly examined it, noting its pupils reacted normally, and though its breathing was rapid, it wasn't critical. He ordered Pio to bring a candle and a stethoscope, piecing together the clues to find the cause. Adrian stood watching, then sternly delivered his own conclusion. Lulu wasn't sick, it was pregnant. Adrian concluded that it was about to become a mother. Marianne, initially in disbelief, struggled to accept his diagnosis. She was absolutely certain that locking the unicorn in the castle's greenhouse made pregnancy an impossibility. Selena supported Adrian's suspicion, noting that Lulu's recent behavioral changes, especially its high alertness, perfectly matched the signs of early pregnancy. When Adrian introduced a medical device used to detect internal sounds, Marianne followed his instructions, using the instrument and recognizing Lulu's heartbeat, and then another, smaller and distinct heartbeat coming from within its belly. Utterly stunned by this revelation, she collapsed, and Adrian caught her. Meanwhile, Ojin calmly explained that the device was called a stethoscope. Adrian was completely amazed by its accuracy, impressed by how clearly it transmitted even the faintest sounds from within the body. Working together, Adrian and Ojin determined that Lulu had been pregnant for about 4 months. Marianne once again rejected the idea, insisting that Lulu hadn't left the greenhouse this entire time. Her assertion only added to the mystery, as the unicorn had been kept isolated in preparation for mating with Shark, Prince Theo's prized warhorse. Despite such precautions, the evidence of pregnancy was undeniable. Lulu was moved to the intensive care unit, where Ojin administered IV fluids and electrolytes to combat the dehydration and malnutrition caused by constant vomiting. The others watched in awe, noting the directness of this treatment that bypassed the digestive system entirely. Silence fell over the room as Marianne tried to process the situation. Selena broke the quiet atmosphere, reasoning that the arranged meeting with the prince's horse must have failed, as unicorns rarely choose a mate and often remain solitary for life unless they meet someone truly worthy. On rare occasions, an extraordinary union would produce a legendary hybrid with a golden body. Adrian suggested sending Lulu to the palace as a royal gift to explain the situation directly to His Highness, believing the prince would welcome such a rare creature. Selena brushed the idea aside as unfeasible, reminding them that tales of hybrid unicorns were mostly myths and the father's identity remained unknown. Adrian pointed out the many exceptional horses raised under Lady Marianne's care, any of which could be a candidate. Siegfried was admired for his speed and beauty, Tara was prized for her stamina, Dolly was renowned for her charm, and Black Thunder was famous for his strength. Marianne conceded that identifying the true mate was essential before making any decisions. As Adrian volunteered to help, Marianne instead pleaded with Ojin, hoping his medical knowledge could uncover the truth. He declined, reminding her that a medical stethoscope couldn't determine paternity. Adrian intervened, admitting that Ojin's intuition and care for Lulu made him better suited to help than anyone else. Selena added that the answer was likely close by, as pregnant unicorns usually showed distress when separated from their mate, yet Lulu had remained calm throughout the journey. Tracing the timeline, Marianne realized that Lulu's agitation only began after they arrived. The carriage route provided the first clue. At the stable, Joseph was tending to a young mixed-breed horse, completely unaware of the rising tension around him. When Lulu saw the young horse, it visibly became overwhelmed with emotion, lunging toward the horse and embracing it with clear recognition. The onlookers were stunned. Marianne was horrified. She couldn't fathom why a unicorn of royal standing would attach itself to a lowly draft horse. The absurdity of the scene prompted Ojin to softly remark, likening it to a melodramatic play where noble parents rejected a forbidden marriage. Adrian, observing Lulu's behavior, affirmed that against all expectations, the bond between the two animals was real. Marianne protested that the other horse was too young. But Ojin pointed out that Lulu's choice was clear and separating them would only harm both it and the unborn child. The evidence left Marianne speechless, her mind reeling at the impossible truth before her. A unicorn, the symbol of purity and grace, was bound by affection to a common stable horse. After discovering the truth about Lulu and the horse, Marianne's father confronted Joseph. He told the young man that letting a common draft horse approach the precious unicorn was sheer madness, while Joseph tried to explain that he knew nothing. But the Count accused him of lying and deliberately profiting from the situation. Despite Joseph's denials, the Count refused to listen and ordered both him and the horse to be locked up, declaring that punishment would be carried out soon. The maids whispered among themselves, agreeing that the Count was being too cruel and that Joseph had done nothing wrong. They pointed out that no one could stop animals from developing affection for one another. The conversation shifted to why Lulu had been sent to the royal palace, with some realizing it might have been a bribe for the crown princess selection later that year. They mentioned Marianne's participation and how Lulu could have lived in royal luxury if things had gone as planned, but instead ended up with a draft horse. One maid remarked that Lulu probably took after its owner. Another implied that there were many things people didn't know about Lady Marianne. Suddenly, a maid warned the others to be quiet. Just then, another maid rushed in to report that Lulu's condition had worsened. The unicorn had started coughing up blood. Marianne immediately hurried to Lulu's side, demanding to know what had happened. The maid explained that Lulu hadn't been able to eat anything due to severe morning sickness and was now vomiting blood. She recalled Selena's warning that pregnant unicorns would become extremely anxious when separated from their mates, and Lulu's health had severely deteriorated as a result. The maid warned that if this continued, the situation could become much worse. Marianne asked when Ojin would arrive, and the maid replied that a message had been sent since morning, but he was delayed due to the long distance. With a look of determination, Marianne decided to find another nearby doctor and ordered the horse to be brought to Lulu. The man leading the horse urged it to move faster, while the maids complained about the stench, stating that being locked up was no excuse, and it should have been washed clean before meeting the young lady. The man insisted that this was a matter of great urgency. Marianne silenced them and instructed the horse to be brought inside. The very moment Lulu saw the horse, she immediately ran over and hugged it tightly. Marianne called for warm water, declaring that she would bathe the horse herself. The maids gasped in shock, but she ignored their protests and ordered them to prepare soup for Lulu. She began to wipe the horse clean with a towel dipped in warm water, thinking to herself that it was truly a heartless animal. However, she couldn't forget how her own parents had once opposed her relationship with a merchant's son. She reflected that Lulu could have lived a life surrounded by luxury, but she wondered if this simple happiness was what Lulu truly desired. Just then, Ojin arrived. He treated Lulu's condition and explained that although animals also had preferences, there was no class division among them. Lulu didn't consider herself nobler than a horse. He administered an IV drip to Lulu and assured Marianne that simply being with the one she loved was enough to make her happy. While handing over the medicine, he noted that this would help for now, but it was merely a temporary measure. The real solution was to allow Lulu and her mate to stay together. Marianne silently agreed. Ojin prepared to leave, stating that he had to return to the clinic where many patients were waiting and his assistant doctor was still there. Although he secretly doubted her capacity for empathy, Marianne assured him that she understood, saying she would leave the subsequent care to him. As Marianne and Ojin watched, Adrian clung clumsily to a tree, clearly struggling to climb down. He finally made it down, apologizing for his rudeness. But Ojin corrected him, calling it a crime instead, while Adrian insisted he only climbed the tree out of concern for Lulu and intended to leave after checking on her. Marianne reminded him that he should have informed the servants. But Adrian explained that he had tried and been denied entry, right as Ojin noticed the device in Adrian's pocket. Ojin recognized it as a stethoscope and casually remarked on how cheap it looked. Adrian, embarrassed, admitted that it was still just a prototype. Our protagonist advised that a doctor should have the proper tools. Ojin advised that a doctor should have the appropriate instruments, thinking to himself that Ojin was a much better person than he had imagined, while Ojin thought the exact opposite, confirming to himself that Adrian was a weirdo. Late that evening, Lulu began to eat on her own and regained some of her strength, bringing great relief to Marianne as Adrian told her that love and care were the best medicine, praising her for taking care of Lulu herself. Marianne reflected that her own stubbornness had caused Lulu to suffer, and admitted she should have reunited them sooner, realizing she might have been jealous of her own unicorn. She recalled how she herself had once been as naive as Lulu, but over time she had grown accustomed to judging others by their status and wealth. Adrian remarked that all nobles were like that, but Marianne thought about her first love instead, remembering how she hadn't cared about status at all, only drawn to the beauty in his eyes. She had given him up for the sake of both their happiness, and now wondered aloud if she was truly happy. Adrian replied that first loves always ended in pain, and that pain could blind a person to the love that was already so close to them. He suggested that her true soulmate might already be by her side. Marianne felt confused, realizing far too late what she had missed, and decided to withdraw from the crown princess selection, as Adrian listened intently. He secretly took a small box out of his pocket, feeling a rare opportunity forming in his heart. He placed it in front of Marianne and began to speak, but suddenly she declared that she would make a move on Ojin. Adrian froze, unsure if he had misheard, and immediately asked again in disbelief. Marianne continued, stating that she would rather seize power herself than marry someone who already had it, leaving Adrian completely dumbfounded. She ended the conversation by thanking him, saying she hoped they could continue to be good friends. Adrian felt devastated by her words and swore he would never forgive Ojin. Back at the clinic, Pio sneezed and then continued reading a paper, informing Ojin that the young horse was being adopted as Lulu's companion and requesting him to become Lulu's personal doctor. The offer included a fee 10 times higher than usual, but our hero refused, explaining that he couldn't leave the clinic due to his busy schedule. And Pio complained that the tartar wouldn't come off despite scrubbing for an hour, so Ojin checked the snake getting its clean, discovered the tartar buildup, and instructed Pio to spray saline solution and prepare anti-inflammatory medicine with cotton balls. While working, he noticed something stuck between its teeth, and pulled out a small object. The pet's owner was overjoyed, revealing that this creature, Shamir, was a spirit beast bestowed upon their family by the late king, and it had just swallowed their family heirloom. Our protagonist noted that there was still some tartar left, and a few teeth might need to be extracted. He estimated that it would take another hour or two of work. Selena remarked that it could take up to 5 hours because the beast had another head. Exhausted, Ojin fell into despair, while the owner tried to encourage him, presenting a portrait of himself and Shamir. The owner explained that the painting was done by their family's official portraitist and asked if Ojin liked it, while he found the painting quite ugly and wanted to refuse. But the painter insisted that he would soon finish and gift it, saying it had been a long time since he found such an inspiring subject. While he was speaking, Shamir's eyes snapped open, and Selena immediately noticed. Ojin grew tense, wondering if the dosage of anesthesia had been enough. Selena raised her hand to cast a protective spell. But Adrian suddenly stepped in front of Selena, and the spell hit him instead of the beast. Selena recognized him as that noble doctor, and wondered why he had appeared so suddenly. Before anyone could react, Shamir opened its mouth and swallowed Adrian whole, and gulped him down completely. Everyone in the room stood frozen in shock, horrified that the beast had just devoured a human. The clinic was closed today. However, a crowd had been waiting outside since dawn, complaining that they had traveled from afar after hearing of the doctor's reputation, while others murmured about trying their luck at the hospital in the neighboring village instead. Watching from a distance, Adrian felt his anger rising. He couldn't forgive Ojin for making women cry while calling himself a healing spirit. He recalled the conversation with his assistant, who, when asked about the healing spirit, described it as a mythical entity capable of granting world-dominating power. Adrian had scoffed at the idea, thinking Lady Marianne was foolish to be swayed by such words, and believing he looked much more like a spirit than Ojin ever could. However, his mind drifted back to his assistant's words about Ojin's miracles, from healing flying fish to turning a demon's apostle into a cat. The stethoscope hanging around Adrian's neck, a gift from Ojin, felt heavier as he remembered being asked if he still cherished it. He had feigned indifference, claiming he would return it. And upon asking if there were other copies, the assistant confirmed there were, now hiding in a tree with binoculars. Adrian told himself he was only there to return the equipment, wondering why he had shown up again. Down below, our protagonist was treating a multi-headed hydra, its two heads moving weakly as he scraped tartar from its gums, rinsed its mouth with water, and applied ointment to prevent infection. Observing closely, Adrian couldn't help but secretly admire him, realizing Ojin's medical skills far surpassed his own, even though he had been the top student at the Royal Academy. Suddenly, the hydra's tail lashed out. It was waking up as the anesthesia wore off. Adrian realized it too late as the creature lunged straight at Selena. He dashed forward to save her, and the hydra swallowed him whole in one gulp, leaving the crowd in sheer terror. Ojin, momentarily stunned, watched the hydra's owner scream in panic. Selena quickly assessed that Adrian had been swallowed completely and prepared to use her magic. But our protagonist stopped her. Noticing the hydra's tongue had turned purple and its airway was blocked, it had swallowed something entirely too large. Applying the method they had practiced, Ojin and Selena sprang into action. Following his count, Selena struck the hydra, forcing it to perform the Heimlich maneuver. The creature thrashed violently, and with one more powerful blow, Adrian was expelled, tumbling to the ground. The hydra's breathing gradually stabilized, and a wave of relief washed over its owners. They endlessly praised Ojin's medical skills. Ojin instructed Selena to check Adrian's condition. She confirmed he was alive but would remain unconscious for a while, due to the effects of the magic used on the Gemini hydra. Ojin silently noted that Shamir's condition had also stabilized, even though the previous shock had caused a bruise on its belly. Selena applied ointment and finished the bandaging. Later that evening, our young man advised the hydra's owners to be more careful, reminding them that any accident caused by a pet swallowing foreign objects was the owner's responsibility. They promised to be more cautious, even joking they would ensure it never swallowed a human again. A few days later, the Baron sent a painting titled The Great Rescue Operation as a gift. Our protagonist dismissed it as bizarre, only to learn that a statue depicting him saving Adrian from Shamir's mouth had also been erected. He felt the world had truly gone mad. Meanwhile, Adrian was still fast asleep, completely unaware of all this, while Pios and Selena stood by his side, waiting for him to wake up. Adrian woke up, dazed about his whereabouts and what had happened, his memory slowly piecing together that he had been spying on Ojin's clinic, seeing the serpent wake up and jumping in to save Selena. The next thing he remembered was being swallowed whole. In the darkness, he grimly thought this was a fitting end for a vegetarian. If there was a next life, perhaps being reincarnated as a unicorn next to a beautiful heroine wouldn't be so bad. Suddenly, pain shot through his body, making him wonder if this was what being unborn felt like, and he silently begged it to stop. He coughed dryly, and that sound pulled him back to reality. Selena stood beside him, noting that he was finally awake. Adrian, still dizzy, wondered if she was his master. She told him not to sit up just yet. The side effects of the magic would leave him dizzy and nauseous, so he should rest for 2 or 3 days. Adrian weakly agreed. Our protagonist walked in with a steaming cup, told him to sit up for a moment, explained it was a recovery potion, and insisted Adrian finish it all. Adrian complied as Ojin mentioned he had even added a few mandrake leaves to the brew. He also informed Adrian that the Astrid mansion had been contacted and he could rest here for a few more days. Adrian declined, not wanting to be a burden. But our doctor reminded him that as a physician, he should know health comes first. Adrian expressed his gratitude, and Ojin said he would step out so Adrian could rest. As Ojin left, Adrian watched him and found himself thinking what an amazing person he truly was. Feeling embarrassed about his previous jealousy, Adrian decided that one day he wanted to be just like him, until he spotted a letter on the bedside table. A bill, accommodation fee 500 silver, meal fee 100 silver, totaling 686 silver. Adrian stared wide-eyed at the bill and muttered curses at Ojin. Meanwhile, at the clinic, a couple stood with their cat, worried that their pet's gender might be changed. Our doctor explained it was just a metaphor. The cat would simply be neutered. The couple protested, arguing that the procedure was too cruel. Our protagonist patiently reminded them that the cat's stamina was declining, raising kittens was arduous, and the female cat's health was severely affected by excessive breeding. He asked what solution they proposed, while the owner argued the cat was still young. Ojin asked if they wanted to calculate how many more kittens there would be in 5 years, or if they were secretly selling fennec fox pups. The owner immediately denied it. But they still argued about what joy the cat would have left if the surgery took place. All too familiar with these arguments, our doctor explained that frequent mating caused rapid aging, shortened lifespans, and reduced the quality of life for both pets and owners. The couple left in tears, with Pio reassuring them she would help schedule the surgery date. After they left, our protagonist muttered about having to schedule it himself sooner or later, exhausted from repeating the same advice every single time. Pio informed him that the next patient was her childhood friend's pet and asked him to take good care of it. Ojin promised he would do so. A girl walked in, holding a large chicken in her arms, and announced they were there for a health checkup. Our doctor noticed the animal's glossy feathers and commented that it looked perfectly healthy. Pio added that Pop was the largest and healthiest among all her friends' pets. The girl nodded with immense pride. 20 minutes later, Ojin finished examining Pop and concluded the chicken was fully qualified to enter a premium poultry contest. The girl remained anxious, mentioning that Pop seemed to have lost weight recently. But Ojin confirmed it wasn't a genuine case of weight loss. She recalled Pop having a seizure during sleep and worried it could be serious, but Ojin concluded it was likely just harmless restlessness. The girl added that Pop's throat had hurt the day before, fearing an infection. Pio reassured her that this was very common. After a thorough examination, Ojin found nothing unusual, helping to soothe her concerns. Moments later, Pio rushed in frantically, declaring that Pop had disappeared. Tia explained she had stopped by the restroom before heading home, and in that exact moment, Pop had vanished. Ojin ordered a lockdown of all entrances and windows. Selena told everyone in the waiting area to stay put because a stray animal was wandering around. Some patients complained that their pets would become restless if locked up for too long. Selena reassured them. Their pets started to act up. The group searched everywhere but still couldn't find Pop. Ojin asked if Pop particularly liked or disliked anything. Tears said she didn't know, but perhaps Pop had already gone outside. The male lead asserted that Pop couldn't open doors or jump through windows on its own, so it must still be inside. Pio remembered that Pop really liked men. Our young man noted that some animals preferred deeper-toned voices. Tyr explained that Pop's obsession with men was extremely severe. Our doctor suddenly realized why Pop had clung to him during the checkup. Selena suggested there was only one place left to look. The room where a man was currently sleeping. They hurried over and found Pop hugging Adrian tightly. Everyone froze in sheer shock. Ojin looked at Tyr and asked why she did it, confronting her directly. He demanded to know why she had intentionally left Pop behind. Right from the start, he had felt that something was off. Throughout his years as a doctor, he had encountered countless types of pet owners. But he had never seen a guardian look disappointed upon hearing their pet was perfectly healthy. He pointed out that no matter how fast a chicken could run, it was too conspicuous and small to lose track of, and far too noticeable to sneak through doors and end up here undetected. He demanded an explanation. Tyr confessed she did it because the Baroness would never believe someone like her. A famous doctor like Ojin declared that Pop was sick and missing, she would buy it. Our doctor asked who would actually fall for such a story. And Tyr replied the Baroness. Desperation filled her voice as she begged Ojin to save her life. If she told the Baroness that Pop was healthy, it would be hunted down. A hunting competition hosted by the Baroness's family was approaching, along with a banquet for esteemed guests, rumored to include Prince Theo, and the Baroness was preparing for this event, planning to cook Pop for the feast. The room fell into absolute silence. Pio exclaimed in disbelief, wondering why anyone would want to eat someone else's pet, especially when the Baroness already owned several giant fire chickens. Tyr explained that those chickens had died last year from an infectious disease. Ojin noted there must be other ingredients available, yet the Baroness insisted on having Pop, Tyr continued. Large fire chickens were highly valued for their vigorous vitality and fertility, being creatures famous for laying an abundance of eggs. Families wanting to strengthen their bloodline often coveted them, believing that eating such a creature would boost vitality, to which the lead bitterly remarked that people everywhere were obsessed with stealing from others through superstition. Tyr revealed that the Baroness had desired Pop for a long time and was now threatening to kick them off their farmland if they refused. Pio furious declared that exploiting someone's livelihood to steal their beloved pet was utterly unforgivable. Tyr pleaded again, asking Ojin to write a diagnosis stating that Pop had an infectious disease. She assured him that if he did, no one would dare lay a finger on the chicken. Our doctor firmly refused. A heavy silence descended upon the room. He explained that the moment a doctor forged a diagnosis, they were no longer a healer. They became a fraud profiting off human lives. Once that line was crossed, no medical treatment they offered could ever be trusted again. Adrian suddenly interjected angrily, accusing Ojin of valuing professional ethics over human lives. To him, a doctor's duty was to save lives, not blindly cling to rules. Ojin remained steadfast, arguing that if he lied and claimed Pop had a dangerous disease, the animal would be permanently labeled as infected. Barns could be sealed off, and every creature there would be at risk of slaughter. If the truth was later exposed, the family could face severe punishment or be blamed for any future disease outbreaks. He asserted that a doctor's purpose was to save people, but never at the cost of endangering hundreds just to protect one. If someone could understand that, they didn't deserve to be a doctor. Tyr hung her head low and softly muttered an apology. Outside the clinic, Tyr burst into tears while Pio tried to comfort her, assuring her there had to be a solution. Tyr desperately thought she could never win against the nobles and considered running away with Pop. Right at that moment, our male lead appeared, telling her there was no need to run. Even though he couldn't help her as a doctor, he could definitely assist her as a fellow pet owner. Tyr and Pio looked up in immense relief upon hearing him explain his plan. Ojin instructed Tyr to spread a rumor inside the Baroness's mansion. Without turning around, he loudly called out to the eavesdroppers nearby, ordering them to step out, especially Adrian, whom he assigned a crucial role. At the Clay family's mansion, the atmosphere buzzed with gossip as guests discussed how Duke Astrid's daughter, Lady Marianne, once considered a strong candidate, had now withdrawn from the crown princess selection. Hearing this, the Baroness grew increasingly pleased, believing this was the perfect opportunity for her daughter to rise. She envisioned the moment her daughter was chosen by the prince, seeing it as sweet revenge against the nobles who had mocked them. She thought the upcoming banquet would be the perfect stage to secure her daughter's future. Her scheming was suddenly interrupted when Adrian appeared at the entrance. The Baroness froze, startled by his arrival and utterly captivated by his striking appearance. As he leisurely approached with an elegant, calm demeanor, offering to speak with her privately at a table, the Baroness was taken aback, staring blankly and wondering who this incredibly handsome stranger could possibly be. Sitting beside Adrian, the Baroness felt like she was dreaming. Surrounded by admiring gazes, she savored the moment, finding it hard to believe she was conversing with such a handsome man at her own party. So she asked if he had graduated from the Royal Academy, and after he confirmed, she eagerly inquired if he had ever met royalty. Adrian replied that he had, adding that he frequently saw Prince Theo since they were in the same class. The Baroness immediately took a mental note, deciding she had to change her home interior to match the latest royal trends. Curious, she asked about the prince's dietary preferences. Adrian responded with mild curiosity, wondering aloud if she intended to prepare a meal for the prince, making her hesitate awkwardly. But he quickly reassured her, saying he understood how difficult preparing royal cuisine could be and offered to introduce her to his personal merchant, a mysterious merchant who solely served the upper class and specialized in trading rare, high-quality imported ingredients. The Baroness was both surprised and overjoyed, declaring she wanted to meet this merchant right away and viewing it as a stroke of incredible luck. Adrian led her to a small cottage. Introduced as the merchant's meeting place, the Baroness looked visibly disappointed by its humble appearance. But her thoughts were cut short when two figures stepped forward, introducing themselves as Louis Vuitton and Chanel, none other than Selena and Ojin in disguise. Our male lead welcomed her warmly, and Selena remarked that her timing was perfect, but the Baroness remained wary, suspecting they might be scammers, so Ojin immediately presented a dessert, describing it as the latest craze among foreign nobles, a mesmerizing sweet treat known as tanghulu. The Baroness observed the shiny fruit skewer, and hesitantly took a small bite. Instantly, her doubts vanished, as the crunchy sugar coating shattered with a delightful crack, releasing a rush of sweet and sour juice that flooded her senses. The sweetness and tartness blended perfectly, leaving her overwhelmed by the flavor and silently admitting these people were truly first-class merchants. Seeing she was impressed, Ojin skillfully changed the subject, mentioning a rumor that she had recently acquired a rare ingredient known as the elixir of life herb. The Baroness was startled, but our hero continued smoothly, describing it as the chickpea of eternal youth, an ingredient rumored to slow aging, improve health, and even prevent ailments like constipation and hair loss. Completely mesmerized, the Baroness demanded to buy the entire stock of those chickpeas. But Ojin explained that all shipments had already been pre-ordered. Adrian insisted that as a regular they should make an exception, while our guy hesitated, explaining that the reserve stock was intended as a gift for the prince from another client. The Baroness panicked and asked if that client had a daughter of marriageable age, when our male lead confirmed it. Realizing her rival's intention to win the prince's favor with this rare delicacy, she desperately offered to pay 10 times the original price. Ojin, feigning nobility, refused to sell it just for the money, declaring that their business was guided by the pursuit of truth, love, health, and peace. Selena stifled aside his theatrical performance, while the Baroness felt ashamed for revealing her greed in front of such respectable figures. Adrian then intervened, suggesting that compassion surely dictated selling the item to the one in greater need. The Baroness looked at him with profound gratitude, as our hero reluctantly agreed to make an exception, and sold the chickpeas to her. Before she left, Ojin warned her about a crucially important precaution. He claimed these chickpeas contained the man of the great fire for chicken, the divine ancestor of all fire chickens. Therefore, anyone who consumed them had to stay away from any chicken-related food for a while. Otherwise, they would suffer the adverse effects of rapid aging, illness, constipation, and hair loss. Although none of this was true, the Baroness was utterly terrified, tormented by the thought of not being able to eat chicken. However, the fear of losing her youth was 10 times worse. She decided to keep the chickpeas and strictly adhered to the dietary restriction. Adrian joked about old men obsessed with vitality, and our male lead played along, mocking such superstitions. The Baroness nervously agreed, calling the obsession with fire chickens outdated. Later, upon returning to the clinic, the plan was a success and Pop was safe. Tyr beamed with relief and gratitude, thanking her hero for saving her pet's life. Ojin smiled and brushed it off, then handed Tyr a specialized transport carrier bought with the money earned from Baroness Clace, explaining that it would help prevent future accidents. Deeply moved, Tyr called him her lifelong benefactor. Our male lead chuckled modestly, telling her she could seek his help anytime. Meanwhile, Mandrake sulked in jealousy as Pop received all the attention, so Ojin offered Tyr a part-time job taking care of the animals, which she eagerly accepted. Just as the mood turned cheerful again, Pop suddenly tried to swallow Mandrake whole, throwing everyone into a panic, until they managed to restrain and lock it safely in the cage. Our male lead reminded Tyr not to bring Pop to work, then turned to Adrian, handing him his cut for his cooperation. Adrian was surprised by the amount received, but Ojin quickly explained that the treatment, boarding, and other fees had been deducted, leaving only 312 silver. Outraged, Adrian grabbed our guy by the collar, scolding him as a scammer for overcharge. Selena interrupted, reminding Adrian that the treatment was effective, causing Adrian to immediately change his tune. Praising her skills and thanking her for the recovery he felt after taking her prescribed medicine, Selena promised to write another prescription to maintain his conditions, which he smilingly accepted. After Adrian left, Selena questioned whether it was wise to let him go, and Ojin admitted that Adrian's medical skills were quite good and he worked well with her. Nevertheless, he temporarily dismissed the idea of recruiting him, while Selena remarked that his greed for money had peaked and predicted that Ojin would soon regret this decision. Prince Theo took a sip of his tea, listening to the chatter about the upcoming hunting competition spreading across the room. Baron Doyle knelt down to apologize, explaining that he had looked for an opportunity to capture Monoceros, but the clinic was always full of people. Theo despised such half measures and demanded a bolder plan to proudly present Monoceros Sanjay in front of everyone and seize power with its help. He warned the Baron that failure would push him into an incredibly dangerous position. A sudden commotion erupted them as the Baron's pet Magma grew restless at feeding time and lunged toward a plate of chickpeas brought in by a servant. The wolf ravenously devoured them all, sending Theo into a fit of rage while the Baron bowed in apology and promised to compensate tenfold, desperately trying to appease the prince's anger. Meanwhile, at Ojin's clinic, an animal that had just undergone surgery was recovering. The staff warned the owners that accidents could happen when animals woke up from anesthesia and advised them to watch closely. Tyr returned, worried about Pop's younger sibling Cheap, as the animal appeared lethargic and was coughing. Ojin examined Cheap, noting it had a mild cold accompanied by muscle weakness, prescribed daily oral medication, and advised careful nursing. When Tyr returned the next day, she reported no improvement and that her dog had now fallen ill as well. Our male lead realized that similar symptoms were appearing across different animal species and decided to hospitalize both animals to prevent the disease from spreading further. Within a few days, the same scenario repeated, with animals from various families being brought in with identical symptoms. Our hero realized this was not merely a common cold, and urgently instructed the owners to cover their noses and mouths, avoid touching objects with hands that had contacted sick animals, and wear gloves. He isolated the symptomatic animals on the second floor and kept the others on the first floor. Although the symptoms were only mild, the medication proved ineffective, and this disease did not discriminate between species at all. Selena warned that at this rate the epidemic would soon break out on a massive scale. Her prediction came true, and the clinic was flooded with desperate owners begging for help. Forced to turn away some patients, our male lead witnessed every neighboring clinic and hospital fall into a state of severe overload. The Baron arrived in a panic because of his house pet Elizabeth, whom he insisted was supposed to be immune to any disease. A newly purchased turtle was discovered as the likely source of the infection. The Baron inquired about vacant properties in the vicinity, and an abandoned building in the back alley was proposed as a temporary annex. Recognizing the scale of the crisis, our hero accepted this loan offer, and suddenly found himself having to single-handedly run a second facility, treating patients in both locations, wondering how he could possibly manage without an extra doctor. Over at Adrian's hospital, he noticed the empty wards and asked why the patients were so scarce. His assistant explained that the town was facing an outbreak of an infectious disease and predicted a request for support. Shortly after, a letter requesting aid arrived from Ojin, asking him to bring spare medicine and equipment, along with a blunt offer of 2 gold per hour plus a potential performance bonus. Adrian was initially furious at the attitude, intending to just burn this arrogant letter. But then he spotted a line mentioning that Selena had collapsed from overwork. Conscience triumphed over ego, and Adrian announced he would leave until the battle against the pandemic was over, reasoning that wherever there were natural disasters and epidemics, a doctor must be present. His assistant remained silent, fully aware of the gravity of this decision. The first great pandemic swept across the land, prompting Pio to gather everyone in the clinic and announce strict quarantine measures. Any animal with symptoms had to be isolated, and unnecessary outings had to be avoided. Questions about when each patient started coughing were constantly asked, and the records quickly piled up. Adrian continued examining patients after 12 hours of nonstop work, noting cases of swollen throats, but in a few instances he ruled out the possibility of the epidemic. Selena meanwhile buried herself in 26 hours of continuous drug testing, while our Malid cared for an exhausted rabbit after 18 hours of continuous treatment, gently finishing the checkup as fatigue weighed heavily on the entire staff. Schwein arrived alongside Max, reporting that 2 more cases had appeared among the hounds preparing for the upcoming competition, pushing the inpatient ward to full capacity. And Tyr informed Ojin that there was absolutely no space left. Nevertheless, Ojin remained determined to find room and continued researching a cure, reassuring everyone that they would do their absolute best. Schwan expressed his gratitude to him, while Adrian questioned why they kept accepting patients beyond their capacity. Our hero answered with his actions, unwilling to turn his back on anyone. Pio reported that some guardians were demanding their pets be discharged, thinking that the mild coughing was harmless. Ojin dismissed that notion, explaining that neglect could lead to irreversible damage, especially for working animals like hounds, which would be discarded if they lost their usefulness. He firmly believed that all animals deserved equal care, regardless of how useful they were. It was late at night. Our protagonist tested the antibiotic infused with Dragon's power, but all his efforts failed. Meanwhile, Selena warned him to stop before the excessive use of dragon energy overloaded his heart. He blamed the instability of magic and even considered studying alternative medicine. Selena pointed out that he hadn't slept for the past 3 days. Before knocking him out, she forced him to get some rest. 5 hours later, Ojin woke up in a daze and was fed fresh, delicious food by Tyr. He realized that the egg belonged to Pop, a healthy chicken completely unaffected by the epidemic. Tyr mentioned that both Pop and Sunjaw were fine despite being exposed to the disease source. Suddenly, our hero connected the clues, reviewing every possible common trait from diet and blood type to temperament, until his eyes locked onto Sunjaw, the cat that Mandrake had spat on, just like how Mandrake had spat on Pop. That was exactly why Sunjaw Pop hadn't been infected. By mixing Mandrake's saliva sample with the saliva of an infected animal, Ojin observed that the gray experimental leaf turned green, confirming that a cure had been found. The clinic erupted in relief as the protagonist and the group praised Mandrake for saving countless lives. Now facing the issue of mass production, the team debated methods like pressing and diluting. But Selena prepared a sweet nutritional drink mixed with a diuretic. Mandrake eagerly gulped it down, and saliva began pouring profusely from its leaves. Astonished by the rapid collection of the essence, Ojin began synthesizing the medicine. By morning, the epidemic had subsided. Max's coughing eased and his strength was fully restored. Our young man felt a profound sense of relief while administering the final doses of the vaccine. Just as he finished the very last prescription, urgent knocking violently echoed outside the clinic. Voices from outside announced the arrival of Baron Doyle and demanded our hero's arrest as he arrived at the clinic with his subordinates, drawing a bewildered crowd that murmured about the unfolding scene. Ojin calmly opened the door, meeting Baron Doyle's intense gaze, as the nobleman declared his arrest for spreading the animal epidemic and profiteering from treatment fees. Our hero's expression hardened. Thinking back to the lie he had once fabricated to protect Sunjaw, he pointed to Sunjaw's fading M-shaped birthmark as proof of his success, realizing that the accusation was merely an excuse. Baron Doyle's true objective was to seize Sunjaw. Pio stepped forward defending Ojin's innocence, but Baron Doyle furiously dismissed those words. Our protagonist put an end to the argument. He agreed to follow them quietly, but firmly requested to anesthetize Sunjaw first. Baron Doyle hesitated before finally agreeing. Ojin silently signaled Selena to prepare a spell for an escape. Misunderstanding him, Selena instead prepared for an attack. Once Sunjaw was anesthetized and placed in the cage, a faint light flickered from the protagonist's ring finger. It was the signal. Selena sprang into action, but not with magic, but with a surprise punch that knocked down one of Baron Doyle's subordinates. She snatched Sunjaw and fled into the crowd. Baron Doyle ordered his men to give chase, prioritizing the cat over Ojin. Our hero realized their intentions, confirming his suspicions. Baron Doyle grabbed Ojin by the collar, threatening to ruin him. But Pio intervened, refusing to let the clinic be destroyed. Adrian stepped up to shield Pio, forcing Baron Doyle to back down under the watchful eyes of the bystanders. The guards escorted Ojin away. Our young man entrusted the clinic to Pio and Adrian, hoping that Selena could keep Sunjaw safe. Rumors quickly spread throughout the city that Ojin, the hero who fought Montnoceros, was the one responsible for the epidemic. Baron Doyle announced a public trial, drawing attention from far and wide. In the dungeon, the protagonist took a brief rest after days of exhaustion, till Baron Doyle arrived with his pack of wolves. Baron Doyle demanded the whereabouts of the cat and the elf. Ojin remained silent, inwardly relieved knowing that Selena and Sunjaw had escaped. Baron Doyle threatened to use violence, pointing toward his snarling pack of wolves. Our hero observed Magma, trembling with an unsteady posture and obvious signs of severe pain. He examined the wolf briefly, noticing blood in its urine and its lethargic state. His diagnosis revealed a severe hernia that had been neglected for far too long. Ojin concluded that immediate surgery was necessary to save the animal's life. Outside the mansion, Selena was hiding with Sunjaw, as the cat grew increasingly restless. Selena clenched her fists, whispering reassurances with a quiet determination that our hero was still safe. Ojin diagnosed Magma with a hernia and immediately demanded the wolf be moved to a clean room for emergency surgery. He ordered the preparation of tools, medicine, and anesthesia, maintaining calm authority as the procedure began. Once these anesthesia took effect and the surgical area was sterilized, our hero started the operation with steady precision. Baron Doyle stood nearby, watching anxiously, while a servant provided a protective apron and gloves to minimize the risk of infection. Throughout the surgery, our protagonist maintained strict control, requesting temperature checks, timing the next anesthesia dose, and insisting on proper sterilization for each instrument. Baron Doyle grew tense, unsure whether to trust Ojin's judgment or not. And outside the room, he found himself doubting the diagnosis, until memories of Magma's mother surfaced, as she had also passed away with similar symptoms. Staring intently at her portrait, he suddenly realized that she had suffered from the exact same illness. Meanwhile, in Baron Doyle's office, petitions demanding Ojin's release began to pile up. Among them was a letter from Lady Marianne Astrid's family, threatening to report Baron Doyle's false accusations to the king unless our protagonist was freed. The servants voiced their outrage, deeply concerned about the growing wave of backlash. The surgery concluded with tremendous success. Baron Doyle rushed over to check on his companion. The animal was breathing steadily, while Ojin calmly explained the treatment plan, prescribing a week of medication and scheduling a date for stitch removal. Finally, exhaustion overtook our hero, and he collapsed onto a nearby sofa, falling into a deep sleep after days of relentless work. Baron Doyle noticed the red marks left by the handcuffs on Ojin's wrists and silently ordered that they never be used again. Back in the cell, our protagonist fell into a deep dream. He found himself enveloped in the warmth of his family, his parents' voices echoing faintly. His mother worried that his clinic must be struggling again, while his father lamented his stubbornness, recalling how Ojin had abandoned medical school to become a veterinarian and wondering what was so noble about caring for animals. Yet our hero felt nothing but peace in his dream. An animal appeared. It leaned closely against him, a creature that was a mix between a cat and a lion, feeling incredibly warm and comforting. Elsewhere, Theo confronted Baron Doyle about the disappearance of the Monoceros. Baron Doyle reported that it had been stolen by the Ethereum Society, revealing that Selena was one of their agents. Reports confirmed her involvement with suspicious elf groups. Theo's anger flared up, condemning Baron Doyle's incompetence. Baron Doyle apologized and hesitated, asking whether Ojin should be released now, mentioning the growing complaints from both nobles and commoners. Theo, already exhausted by this issue, left the decision to him. At the mansion, our hero was finally set free. Before leaving, he instructed the servants to bring Magma back in 3 days to remove the stitches and handed them a list of precautions. A servant mentioned another patient, a hound with a sore knee, and our protagonist agreed to check on it soon. Stepping outside, Ojin saw his friends waiting at the gate. A wave of surprise and relief washed over him, as they revealed they were prepared to storm the castle if his release was delayed any longer, and he expressed his heartfelt thanks to them. Shortly after, Sunja, Mandel, and Pop rushed forward, hugging him tightly in overwhelming joy. Selena stood nearby, safe and sound, wearing a gentle smile. Hugging Sunja tightly, our hero recalled his dream and the silhouette that closely resembled her, reaffirming his belief that becoming a veterinarian was the right choice. From a window inside the mansion, Baron Doyle watched silently. His servant anxiously asked if they were really letting Ojin go. Baron Doyle's eyes remained fixed on the scene as the servant insisted that something strange had happened in the cell. The Monoceros was seen licking the doctor's face before completely vanishing. Baron Doyle quickly dismissed that claim, although his inner thoughts revealed utter bewilderment, declaring Ojin the victor in their conflict. Days later, a sealed envelope arrived at Baron Doyle's desk, containing a detailed surgery bill from our hero. Upon reading it, the Baron clenched the paper until his knuckles turned white, swearing never to forgive him. In the morning, Adrian arrived at the clinic, greeting Selena as he handed over the herbs she had requested earlier, while Ojin watched from a distance, wondering why Adrian had returned once again. Selena inspected the bundle of herbs, surprised that such rare plants could be found out of season. Adrian confidently declared that nothing was beyond his reach. She handed him another list, which he eagerly accepted. As Selena checked the supplies, Adrian remarked on their excellent quality, specifically praising a spincha branch, only to realize it had vanished from his hand. The culprit was Bloop, the tiny slime-like creature now happily munching on the herb, prompting Adrian to scold it and reach out to take the branch back, but Bloop bit his finger, split into 3, and slapped him right in the face. Glaring, Adrian muttered that the creatures truly resembled their master, and any animal raised by our hero possessed a terrible temper. Selena corrected him, claiming Bloop was her child, which led Adrian to remark that it was no wonder the creature had such exquisite taste in herbs. Bloop smirked mischievously, and Adrian stood dumbfounded, realizing the creature had just laughed at him. Selena locked Bloop in a cage to restrain its mischievous antics. Inside the clinic, Bloop, also known as Ping Ping, was no ordinary slime. It proudly boasted about its domain and declared the herb room on the second floor as its territory. Among the hundreds of animals passing through every day, only 2 entities truly held power. It was none other than itself and Kim Sunja, Ojin's right hand and the clinic's supervisor. Even though Sunja possessed unparalleled physical strength, she wouldn't dare provoke it either. Inside Ping Ping's forehead was a splitting core capable of infinitely duplicating its body, bringing disaster to anyone who angered it. When they first met, Sunja sensed its danger and attacked first, but Ping Ping demonstrated its power, crushing any resistance. Since then, it lived comfortably under Selena's protection, co-ruling the clinic alongside Sunja. Later that day, an owner rushed into the clinic with a motionless pet hit by a carriage, begging for help. Ojin examined the tiny body and found the airway still clear, then ordered rhythmic chest compressions as he methodically performed CPR, ignoring the owner's skepticism. Moments later, the animal coughed and started breathing again. Shock turned into sheer awe as the owners declared it a miracle. Meanwhile, Ping Ping watched from its cage, amazed by our protagonist's ability to bring the dead back to life. Ojin asked to get a leaf from Mandal. Ping disdainfully recalled Mandal's lowly status as Sanja's minion and mocked its pathetic dance. Mandal glared back, prompting Ping Ping to taunt, even more visibly amused by the other's lack of shit. As night fell, Ping Ping continued its self-training routine by running on the wheel until it split itself into 3 clones, causing chaos throughout the clinic. It admired its base, a cozy spot by the protagonist, as a testament to its loyalty, perfectly positioned for both temperature and humidity. Its satisfaction instantly turned into furious rage upon discovering that its base had been destroyed beyond recognition. It immediately suspected Mandal, who was chuckling quietly from afar. Anger flared up as Ping Ping accused the plant of daring to challenge it. Mandal, now empowered by recent herbal supplements, stood firmly in place. Ping Ping mocked him for daring to challenge his superior, then lunged forward to attack. Mandal dodged it, and Ping Ping tumbled backward. Sizing up its opponent, Ping Ping noticed Mandal's physical improvement and resilience, but reminded him that without a pot, he was nothing but a plant destined to wither away. With a lightning-fast strike, Ping Ping shattered Mandal's pot, causing him to collapse onto the floor in utter despair. To assert its dominance, Ping Ping demanded that he kneel. Mandal glared up, filled with despair and fury. He prepared his secret weapon, a sonic screech capable of tearing eardrums. Ping Ping sensed the danger, trying to cover its ears before realizing its stubby arms couldn't reach them. The attack failed, emitting only a weak trembling sound. Ping Ping mocked Mandal's silence, thoroughly pleased with its opponent's defeat. Right after that, our male lead walked in, drawn by the loud noise. Looking around the battlefield and seeing Mandal slumped next to the broken pot, he instantly understood what had happened. Kneeling beside the crying plant, he gently coaxed and reassured it that everything would be all right. Picking up the shards of the broken pot, Ojin smiled softly and decided it was time to repot Mandal once again. Having received a massive dose of supergrowth serum, Mandal had grown to 1.5 times its original height. Our male lead prepared a much larger pot for it, filling it with the best soil and topping it off with premium organic nutrients. However, as soon as Mandal settled into its new home, it quickly began to look unwell. Ojin checked it thoroughly, feeling puzzled by its lack of responses. Selena stood silently observing. Suddenly, she plucked one of Mandal's leaves, startling our male lead. A faint cry echoed from Mandal, ringing throughout the clinic. It flinched and cowered, covering its ears while Selena froze, equally startled. After a tense moment of silence, Mandal gave a feeble response. Ojin concluded that being frequently uprooted had made Mandal's voice hoarse, reassuring it that its voice would naturally return over time. The next day, Mandal looked even worse, with drooping leaves, a pale surface, and rapidly spreading signs of aging. Ojin's anxiety deepened, fearing that Mandal might wither away completely. Selena wondered if it was lacking fertilizer and suggested adding more, but before she could act, Pio stepped forward, voicing a warning about such ignorance. She asserted that completely replacing the soil had caused Mandal to be rejected. The familiar soil was like a lifeline to Mandal. Replacing it all at once left it too weak to adapt. Had they delayed treatment, Mandal wouldn't have survived. Pio took charge, ordering immediate remedial steps to be taken. All the leaves had to be trimmed off to retain moisture. Mandal was placed in a well-ventilated, shaded area to limit photosynthesis. Ojin quietly encouraged Mandal to endure for the next few days, promising that it would recover. That night, under the moonlight, Mandal stood silent and motionless, weeping softly from its. Ping Ping waddled over happily, completely oblivious to the surrounding tension, and wanted to land a playful kick. Before it could make a move, our male lead caught it midair. Suddenly realizing that Ping Ping had stolen the missing herbs, Ojin scolded it for being greedy and careless, pointing out that it had gained weight. Ping Ping retaliated by biting his finger. Just then Sunja appeared and smacked Ping Ping on the head. The mark on Ping flared up, radiating an intense. Ojin panicked as he realized a dangerous surge of energy was erupting, begging the reaction to stop. His necklace suddenly emitted a brilliant glow, enveloping Ping in a sealing barrier. The power of the mark, its splitting core, was absorbed into the necklace. Ojin stumbled back as the energy dispersed throughout the room. A shockwave struck Mandal's pot. Mandal was instantly revived, its colors returning as its appearance brimmed with vitality, and it started swaying as if dancing. Our male lead stood staring in sheer astonishment. Selena explained that the energy from Ping Ping's splitting core had triggered rapid cell division in Mandal, granting extraordinary regeneration and accelerating its growth. Pio rejoiced at Mandal's recovery, relief evident on her face, while Ojin chuckled softly as the tension dissipated. Selena picked up the exhausted Ping Ping, reassuring it that its core was safe and would recover over time. Our male lead warned against ever letting Ping Ping eat Mandal's leaves again, while Selena acknowledged the wondrous splitting core that had saved them all. She silently credited her master for creating it. In the Western Forest, there was a ghost story known as the Legend of the Legless Beauty. Rumor had it that she appeared as a beautiful woman with long flowing hair, but in reality she was a man-eating monster with razor-sharp teeth and no hind legs. Crawling on her two front limbs, she would appear whenever she heard a child crying. Some said she was the vengeful spirit of a monster driven mad after losing her child. Pio recounted this tale with absolute conviction, insisting it was real. But Ojin brushed it off, deeming it absurd and baseless. Pio still stood her ground, while our male lead questioned it since there were no witnesses at all. At this point, Selena revealed that she had found traces of the creature in the western forest a week ago. Tracks of something crawling on its two front limbs were etched into the ground. Its eerie presence had driven everyone away, allowing her to gather herbs in peace. Ojin began to feel a sense of unease. Suddenly, a scratching sound came from the door. Both Pio and Ojin flinched as Selena remarked that it sounded like someone was outside, ignoring their warnings not to open the door. She flung the door open, revealing Max standing behind it. Our male lead was startled, noticing that Max had Schwein's clothes in his mouth. Suspecting that something bad might have happened to Schwein, and followed Max to find out. When he finally reached Schwein, he found him perfectly safe and sound. Schwein greeted him, asking what had brought him here. Ojin, sighing in relief, thanked him as Schwein recognized the piece of cloth as part of Max's soothing toy, realizing the dog must have been extremely bored since he had been too busy lately. While in the forest, Ojin noticed that Schwein was working late. Schwein pointed to a net hanging from a tree. A kitten was trapped inside it. He explained that poachers were highly active in the western forest, setting nets everywhere that constantly trapped young animals. There was a kitten suspended too high for him to reach, so he was planning to go fetch a pole. While waiting, Ojin noticed marks on the tree, deep scratches as if something had clawed at it. Schwein also observed that the footprints around the base of the tree were very strange, looking like those of a creature that only crawled on its two front limbs. Both of them grew uneasy, recalling the ghost story. Suddenly, they heard a crying sound. Our male lead asked Schwein to stop making that noise, admitting that he hated this kind of stuff. Schwein denied making the sound, but the crying drew closer and closer. Then, a figure emerged, and both froze, terrified that the legless monster had arrived. Instead, it turned out to be a fox. Ojin noticed that its hind legs were injured, explaining the dragging footprints on the ground. The trapped kitten continued to cry from above, and the fox barked up at it, clawing at the tree trunk. Our male lead realized the fox was responding to the cries and suspected it intended to eat the kitten. The crying persisted, and the net began to shake. Suddenly, the cage plummeted down. Ojin rushed forward, catching it just in time. Breathing a sigh of relief, he looked inside and saw it wasn't a kitten, but a baby fox, and it was already dead. A sudden noise behind our protagonist made him turn around. A large fox stood there, ready to attack. Ojin realized he had let his guard down. Suddenly, Selena appeared and shot a tranquilizer dart at the fox. The animal fell down unconscious. Selena checked to see if our hero was injured and found him completely unharmed. She had just arrived minutes earlier, drawn by curiosity about the rumored creature, which was now revealed to be a celestial fox. Ojin closely examined the fox, confirming its identity and noticing numerous wounds all over its body, including gunshot wounds on both of its hind legs. Selena also inspected it and noticed that it must have recently given birth. Its mammary glands were swollen with faint nursing marks, indicating it hadn't fed its offspring for a while. Our hero realized that the dead baby fox in the net was undoubtedly its child. The baby fox had been murdered by hunters who were cursing their bad luck, disappointed that it hadn't fully matured yet. Nevertheless, they still decided its white fur would fetch a good price before taking it away. The mother fox's furious cry echoed throughout the forest as she lunged at them, forcing the hunters to flee. In the silence that followed, she approached the lifeless body of her cub, only to see a tiny appear beside it, meowing softly. She embraced her wounded cub and lay down in the rain as the baby fox weakly nursed. Late that night, the mother fox opened her eyes again. While she was sleeping, the kitten from earlier appeared nearby once more. The baby fox crawled toward the kitten, and the two started playing together, until the very next moment both were caught in a net. The mother fox woke up with a start at the noise, seeing her child trapped high up on a tree branch, and could only cry helplessly at the base of the tree. Now, in the present, the mother fox was thrashing violently on the clinic floor while our hero tried to hold her down. But she sank her teeth deep into his arm. Reacting quickly, he injected a dose of tranquilizer into her neck, and her body stiffened up, before slowly relaxing as he stopped her from tearing her stitches. Morning arrived, and a low growl echoed through the waiting room, drawing everyone's attention. Sunjaw crawled closer, trying to peek inside the treatment room where the sound came from. It had been 3 days since the fox was admitted, but she still went into a frenzy every time she woke up, and her body had started resisting the tranquilizers. Pio quietly wondered if the fox knew her child was already dead. But our protagonist disagreed, as the baby fox's corpse had been lifeless for days. If the mother fox had always been nearby, she must have known this clearly. He noticed the stitches were torn open again, the wounds refusing to heal, as if her body was reflecting the torment in her mind. Ojin reflected that trauma existed in animals too. Trapped in agonizing and furious memories, they would attack themselves and the world around them, much like the monsters in Western ghost stories. The kitten rescued alongside the fox had recovered after receiving an IV drip, but since it was still weak, it required careful monitoring. Our hero reminded Pio to keep it warm and ensure it stayed far away from the mother fox's cage. Pio agreed and went to replace the kitten's cold water bottle with a warm one. The little kitten meowed softly, glancing toward the mother fox's enclosure. When Pio returned with the heating pad, she froze. The cage door was wide open and the kitten had disappeared. Panic washed over her as she saw inside the fox's cage snuggling against the mother fox's body. Pio immediately alerted Ojin, fearing the worst. In the fox's unstable condition, any movement could be lethally dangerous. But as they rushed in, they found the kitten sitting against the fox, quietly nursing. The fox shifted slightly, her eyes fluttering open, and a single tear rolled down her face. Instead of going berserk, she lowered her head and gently licked the tiny creature. The whole room seemed to stand still, awestruck by the sight of a wounded predator finding peace in the warmth of another living soul. The next day, the kitten scampered across the clinic floor, holding Pio's glove tightly in its mouth. Pio lazily reached out to take it back, but then gave up as the kitten bolted straight toward the fox's cage. She decided she would retrieve it later. What mattered more right now was the fox itself. Her recovery, once stalled, had now become miraculous. The wounds that refused to close were cleanly healed, and her sleep was no longer plagued by nightmares. Pio was utterly amazed by this progress, unable to believe the creature once thought paralyzed could move her legs again as her nerves had started regenerating. Our hero observed quietly, reflecting that while he couldn't return everything humans had taken away, he could at least restore a small fraction of what was lost. When the fox and kitten were finally set free, they walked into the forest together. He silently bid them farewell, hoping they would never meet again under such heartbreaking circumstances. The fox looked back one last time as a parting greeting before disappearing behind the trees. Over time, the rumors about a monster in the western forest gradually faded, replaced by a much gentler tale of a white fox roaming around with a little kitten always by its side. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Mandrake stretched proudly in his pot, attracting curious stares as visitors whispered about the strange radish-like plant that moved on its own. Speculating whether it was the clinic's guardian deity, some were certain it was a mandrake, while others claimed the true guardian deity was a terrifying cat rumored to be able to subdue even wild beasts. Annoyed by the bustling chatter, Mandrake stomped his feet toward Sunjaw's food bowl and flipped it over in an act of defiance. The crowd gasped in how dare he challenge the authority of that particular cat. Their astonishment only grew as Sunjaw herself appeared, her eyes flashing brightly. Mandrake froze in sheer terror as the cat approached. She lunged forward, but instead of attacking, she threw up a hairball right on top of his head. Confusion spread among the onlookers until our protagonist calmly explained that cats often swallow loose fur while grooming themselves, which would then accumulate and be expelled through vomiting. Realizing how rarely he had brushed her lately, he decided it was high time for a proper grooming session. An hour later, Sunjaw's fur seemed endless as the piles of shed hair grew higher and higher, and our hero began to worry that the cat might go bald at this rate. Just then, a small bald patch caught his eye. Looking closer, he realized with a sense of dismay that it might be a fungal skin infection. The thought stung deeply. How could a veterinarian overlook the condition of his very own cat? He took out an incredibly exquisitely crafted tool. Made by the town's best artisan, it was the world's first manual pet hair clipper. Although not necessary for the treatment, he still felt an urge to use it. As he began to shave the fur, Sunjaw hissed and dashed off the table. This moment called for restraint, but the doctor in him refused to back down. A veterinarian must never surrender in a battle of wills against an animal. Focusing his mind, he steadied himself. He softly whispered reassuring words as he continued. Sunjaw squirmed and cried out. Yet he gently proceeded, determined to finish quickly for her own good. Then, without any warning, her neck began to glow. The light spread, flooding the clinic with a radiant aura that could be seen even from the outside. Startled, our protagonist took a step back as a magic circle formed beneath her. From within the magic circle, Killian materialized, not as a projection but his actual self in the flesh. A moment later, over a cup of tea, Ojin recounted everything. Killian listened intently, then explained that Sunjaw's condition was not a disease at all but a natural shedding phase. Unicorns go through rapid growth cycles, during which they shed their fur completely. To restore their vitality, they must cleanse themselves in Sable Lake. Otherwise, their fur might fall out and never grow back. Our hero realized with secret anxiety that his clinic's beloved mascot, the cat adored by all visitors, was suffering from severe hair loss. Killian calmly observed the situation, explaining that while it posed no major health risk, it simply needed time for the fur to regrow. That reassurance couldn't diminish Ojin's resolve, and he decided to seek out Sable Lake immediately, convinced it would help his companion recover. Killian clarified that the lake was not a single fixed location, but rather a type of lake rich in magic and spiritual energy inhabited by sable seals that fed on it. There was such a lake in the Belmore region. Although it lay within a protected area controlled by the Ethereum Church, the place was highly dangerous for ordinary travelers. Undaunted, our protagonist insisted on setting off at dawn, while Selena expressed her concern, warning that the journey was perilous. But Killian agreed to be their guide. He asked about the clinic, yet Ojin insisted the patients would be fine. Adrian would oversee everything during his absence. By morning, they had approached the western forest. This land felt like a living myth, dense, silent, haunted by countless ghost stories with strange lights shimmering between the trees and the very air vibrating with mana, so very few dared to walk here. Before long, they spotted a creeping red flower, and Killian remarked that the lake must be very close. Ojin crouched beside an unfamiliar flower, noting its unusual shape, but Selena warned him not to touch it, as sable seals secreted toxins when disturbed and countless other dangers lurked among the roots. Suddenly, Sunja trotted over proudly, with a snake dangling from her teeth. Our boy leaned down, petting her in praise, while Selena carefully removed the snake. The snake's body bore a distorted human face. It was a human-faced snake, both rare and deadly, and Ojin shuddered at the sight. He quickly placed Sunjaw in her carrier to prevent further trouble. Killian chuckled, remarking that the cat looked utterly offended by this restraint. When they reached the lake, its surface emitted a soft shimmer, mana swirling beneath like liquid starlight. Even our protagonist, who was accustomed to the extraordinary, was momentarily left speechless. Mesmerized by its beauty, he decided to enter the water alone. Killian objected, warning that it was too dangerous, but Ojin remained resolute. Cats become extremely wary when exposed to unfamiliar environments, and the presence of others would only cause more panic. She could hardly endure being brushed, so a bath would undoubtedly be far worse. Killian finally yielded, praying for a blessing from the water god. His incantation summoned the protection of Celestia, enveloping Ojin in a magical layer and granting him gills that faintly sparkled under the mana light. No longer threatened by danger, Ojin took a deep breath to compose himself, muttering self-deprecatingly that he'd rather faint than face what was coming. Nevertheless, he held Sunjaw in his arms, gently coaxing her with true retreat, as they both waded into the glowing lake. The cat paused for a moment before gliding smoothly across the water, and instead of panic, a sense of calm was evident on her face. This sight astounded him, and a thought suddenly crossed his mind. Perhaps this was the legendary water-type cat, a creature rumored to appear only to those whose families had accumulated good karma for 3 generations. Sunjaw floated gracefully underwater, her fur shimmering like liquid silver, a sight that completely melted the hero's toughness. It made him yearn for the conveniences of his old world. A camera, barbecue, cold beer, or coffee, anything to capture this moment. The lake sparkled around them with mana bubbles popping like effervescent light. As our protagonist brushed her, the fur began to peel off in transparent waves, as if she wasn't just shedding but molting, and Ojin was utterly amazed by this transformation, until the bar of soap slipped from his hand, drifting toward a cluster of strange flowers. Instinctively, our boy reached out, only to realize too late that he had touched the highly toxic Sublesia flower. A sharp pain pierced through his hand, and the world blurred as the water faded into darkness. When Ojin opened his eyes, he was no longer in the lake, but in an incredibly unfamiliar place. Our protagonist looked around in confusion, muttering to himself in disbelief. Suddenly, a massive paw rested on his shoulder. Slowly turning his head, he saw a lion standing behind him, its golden eyes still and unblinking. He froze, a question forming on his lips. Who exactly was this creature standing before him? You.